The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Medea Benjamin's new book, Kingdom of the Unjust, Behind the U.S.-Saudi Connection. And this is from the introduction. Through the women-led peace organization Code Pink, which I co-founded with Jody Evans after the 9/11 attacks, I have spent much of the last decade standing up against the U.S. military intervention in the Middle East and supporting local democracy activists. I traveled many times to the region, listening to human rights activists, marching with them in the streets, dodging tear gas and bullets, and getting beaten up and deported by government thugs. I have seen firsthand the deadly effects of U.S. foreign policies. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq destroyed the lives of millions, including many of my dear friends, and unleashed the sectarian hatred that later gave birth to the Islamic State. I recall a conversation with my Iraqi colleague Yanar Mohammed, daughter of a Shiite father and a Sunni mother, and founder of the Organization of Women's Freedom in Iraq. When I asked her what was the most notable legacy of the U.S. invasion of her country, she gave the chilling response: we, Sunnis and Shia, learned to hate each other. In another part of the Middle East, U.S. military support for Israel has wreaked havoc on the lives of Palestinians and aroused the ire of people throughout the region. Continuous U.S. military interventions, from drone warfare in Yemen to overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi in Libya to funneling an endless stream of weapons into the region, have unleashed new levels of violence. But the United States is not the only nation whose massive footprint has been trampling on the lives of people in the Middle East. The other nation is Saudi Arabia, an oppressive monarchy that denies human rights to its own people and exports extremism around the world. It also happens to be the closest U.S. ally in the Arab world. During the 1980s and 1990s, I met intolerant and violent young men in Pakistan and Afghanistan who were trained to hate Westerners in Saudi schools. In 2001, I saw my own nation convulsed by an attack on September 11th that was perpetrated mostly by Saudis. Not hard to connect the dots behind the spread of the Saudi intolerant ideology of Wahhabism, the creation of Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, and the attacks in New York, Paris, Brussels, and San Bernardino. You can also connect the dots between Saudi Arabia and the failure of some of the historic uprisings associated with the Arab Spring, since the Saudi monarchy did not want calls for democracy to threaten its own grip on power. I was in Bahrain after Saudi tanks crushed the inspiring grassroots encampment in Pearl Square, where tens of thousands had gathered day after day to demand democracy. I will never forget the excitement of being in Tahrir Square during the Egyptian Revolution, then watching aghast as a military coup backed by the Saudis put some 40,000 activists behind bars. In Yemen, the Saudis took a direct military role in that nation's internal conflict with a ruthless bombing campaign. When I travel overseas, people often ask me why Saudi Arabia, a country that is so repressive internally and overseas, is such a close ally to the United States. Iranian friends want to know why the U.S. government is so outspoken about human rights violations in Iran, but silent about the worst abuses in the Saudi kingdom. Yemenis want to ask why my government supplies weapons to the very nation, Saudi Arabia, that bombed their schools and hospitals. Saudi women ask why the United States, which professes great democratic values, props up a regime that treats women as second-class citizens. The easy answer is oil, weapon sales, and other business interests. Oil has formed the basis for U.S.-Saudi ties. The kingdom has become the largest purchaser of American weapons in the world, and hundreds of billions of Saudi petrodollars help shore up the U.S. economy. But there's another reason, perhaps more critical than any of the others. The American people have not demanded an end to this dysfunctional, toxic relationship. Why? In part, because the American people know so little about it. Even Americans who consider them parts of a peace movement know virtually nothing about the kingdom. The Saudi press is muzzled, foreign journalists are strictly monitored, and only tourists visiting for religious purposes are allowed into the country. Add to that a Saudi lobby that lines the pockets of U.S. think tanks, such as the Middle East Institute, Ivy League universities, such as Harvard and Yale, and influential institutions from the Clinton Foundation to the Carter Center. This checkbook diplomacy helps put a happy face on the abusive monarchy and silences its critics. So we have a lot to uncover. This book is meant to be a primer, giving readers a basic understanding of how the kingdom holds on to power internally and tries to influence the outside world. It looks at the founding of the Saudi state, the treatment of dissidents, religious minorities, women, and migrant workers, the spread of Wahhabism, the kingdom's relationship with the West, and its role in the region, and what the future might hold. As we delve into the inner workings of this dystopian regime, don't mistake criticism of Saudi Arabia for Islamophobia. This book is not a critique of Islam, but a critique of three intertwining factors that have shaped the Saudi nation: the extremist interpretation of Sunni Islam, known as Wahhabism, the appropriation of the Saudi state by one family, and Western support for this dynasty. Criticizing Saudi Arabia should not be equated with support for Saudi's nemesis, Iran. The Iranian government is guilty of some of the same abuses as the Saudis. Book Kingdom of the Unjust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, a lot of interesting stuff going on right now. Donald Trump visiting Puerto Rico, hopefully putting that story back in the news. I mean, people are dying. This is a disaster, and it's also an extraordinary opportunity for us to take a Caribbean island nation and turn it into a 21st century energy showcase. Although that would kind of go against what the Trump administration is doing right now. They're trying to actually jack up the prices that we have to pay for electricity if it's made with nuclear power or with coal to subsidize the nuclear and coal industries. But that's, kind of a whole other thing. But here we are, the Washington Post, this is the New York Times today, has an editorial. It's by the editorial board. The headline pretty much says the whole thing: 477 days, 521 mass shootings, zero action from Congress. Going back, basically going back a year. June of last year, 31 mass shootings. July, 49 mass shootings. August, 42 mass shootings. This is amazing. September, 32 mass shootings. October, 31 mass shootings. November, 36 mass shootings. December, 27 mass shootings. This is in the United States, of course. Europe? No. January, 31 mass shootings. February, 25 mass shootings. March, 22 mass shootings. April, 39 mass shootings in the United States in the month of April. There's not even 30 days in April. May, 23 mass shootings. 35 in June. 36 in July. 33 in August. 27 in September, and here we are in October. We're 2 mass shootings, and it's the third. Brilliant. Jim Turr sends me a note. He said, things more heavily regulated than buying a gun in the United States. Now, it's a little funnier when you read it because it's got the F word in every single sentence, but I'm going to delete that and I'll just say it without it. Having a bake sale is more heavily regulated than buying a gun in the United States. Building a shed in your own backyard, pumping gas, getting a vasectomy, owning a car, driving someone else's car,
riding in a car, disposing of batteries, cutting hair for a living, having a controlled bonfire on your own property, owning a dog, walking a dog, selling a mattress, watching a DVD, holding any sort of public performance, importing foreign cheese, changing your last name to that of your spouse's. All of these things more difficult than buying a gun in the United States. Right? Buying fireworks, riding a bicycle, having a swimming pool, Xeroxing and distributing copyrighted material, transporting a bottle of opened wine home from a restaurant, using a skateboard, buying unpasteurized milk, having sex, and recycling. All more heavily regulated or whatever, the word is than guns. Roy Zimmerman has a song out, and I think this is an older song of his. You'll notice yesterday at 2:45, Congress paused for 1 minute for a moment of silence so that we could send our thoughts and prayers. This is kind of the NRA's official, whenever there's a bunch of people killed with guns, the NRA goes silent, and then, if there's anything to be said, it's our thoughts and prayers are with the family. Here's what Roy Zimmerman has to say about that. Roy is a musician, by the way, if you haven't figured that out. Plays pretty good music.
Another day, another crazy loner with a gun. Another mad jihadi's done what cannot be undone. The congressperson semi-automatically declares, to the victims of this tragedy, we send our thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, that's all any Republican is going to send.
If guns are regulated, well, we're on a slippery slope to common sense and public safety, reason, peace, and hope. But rest assured, we've got the issue square in our crosshairs. And to the victims of this tragedy, we send our thoughts and prayers.
Okay. Well, that's Roy Zimmerman. We're going to be talking with both Julio Rivera and Dennis Kucinich as we go through the program here. Although Dennis wants to talk about nuclear weapons. That should be an interesting one. Over at The Onion, Brian Stelter of CNN tweeted this out. They have this story that they just publish over and over and over again with always the same headline. Quote, "No way to prevent this," end quote, says only nation where this regularly happens. And, of course, that was the headline in The Onion yesterday, October 2nd, 2017. It was the headline, "No way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens," December 3rd, 2015, October 1st, 2015, June 17th, 2015. And it just goes on and on and on. The Onion keeps making these pronouncements, keeps pointing this out. Now, there's also, not just the NRA having blood on their hands and all that, but there's also a difference in the way that our media has been responding to this, and in the way, of course, that Donald Trump has been responding to this. And I think they're both worth pointing out. The first is Trump's reaction, how Trump's reaction has been different. And it has to do, as far as I can tell, and I'll lay the evidence out and you can make up your own mind, but it has to do, I believe, with the race and religion of the shooter. This guy is a white guy who is presumably Christian or something close to it, culturally, birthwise, whatever. And so what Donald Trump tweets out is my warmest condolences and sympathies, prayers and thoughts, right? Thoughts and prayers. My warmest condolences and sympathies to the victims and families of the terrible Las Vegas shooting. God bless you. That's what Trump tweeted out in response to a white killer. Now, what happens when the killer is a Muslim or a brown person? There's a fascinating article about, summarizing all this by E.A. Crunden over at thinkprogress.org. In 2015, Trump responded swiftly to attacks in Paris, France, and San Bernardino, California, pointing to the religion, the faith of the perpetrators as the rationale for their violence. This year in August, after a van hit pedestrians in Barcelona, Spain, killed 14 people, the president initially took to Twitter to offer his condolences and support. A short time later, he tweeted again
this time reviving an Islamophobic myth about General John Joseph Pershing. Remember Trump tweeted, hey, you want to know how to deal with these people? Go back and look at what Pershing did. He dipped the bullets into pig's blood, and it scared them Muslims. And it's all a lie. I mean, Trump is quoting something that never happened. But, what was weird, what they note over at Think Progress is that even before they knew the identity or the motive of the killer, Trump was tweeting this. He writes, after a series of attacks occurred in Germany and Turkey last December, Trump swiftly blamed, quote, Islamic terrorists for the violence without any confirmation. In September, after an explosion hit the London Underground, Trump quickly blamed the incident on a, quote, loser terrorist, plus, taking the opportunity to brag on his travel ban. Another attack in London by a loser terrorist, Trump wrote on Twitter. These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard. He's not calling this shooter sick and demented. Have you noticed? I mean, maybe he will. We'll see. E.A. Crundon notes also in this piece for Think Progress. Last February, Trump failed to offer comment after 6 men were killed at a mosque in Quebec City, Canada. In May, the president took several days to respond after a white supremacist targeting 2 young women on a train in Portland, Oregon, killed 2 men who tried to intervene. He similarly has said little about a spike in hate crimes targeting South Asians in the United States, many of whom are read as Muslim, regardless of their faith. And after a Minnesota mosque was bombed in August, Trump also remained silent, instead firing off a number of tweets about other topics. So when the shooter is white, the rules apparently, at least for Trump, and I would say for the media as well, and we've had this conversation many times on this program, the rules are different, shall we say. The rules seem to be quite different. The rest of the world, meanwhile, is looking at us going, what the hell? I mean, seriously. How can you people call yourself free when you're scared to go outside? How can you call yourself free when you can't walk into a government building without going through a magnetometer? You got so many guns running around loose in America. How can you call yourself free with all these weapons, all these instruments of intimidation and death, facing you all over the place? Why do you still let people buy weapons of war? New Zealand Herald, roll of shame, the worst U.S. shootings. The Independent, the United Kingdom, Las Vegas gun laws. How easy is it to buy in Nevada? Very. Sky News correspondent, this is from Dee Parvis's piece over in Think Progress. Sky News correspondent Greg Millham quoted witnesses who said the scene was a war zone. And the British broadcaster asked anti-gun violence campaigner Gary Paddock, former member of the NRA, how Paddock could possibly have so many weapons of war. The Indian Express headline, while U.S. President tweeted about his warmest condolences to families of the victims, people asked for a stronger law. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, quote, one suspects that if the shooter's name had been Mohammed, it would have been a different tune. And, quote, just know that in Nevada, the next gambler walking into a casino where you're enjoying a drink might be angry or crazy or carrying a machine gun legally. And with regard to Trump's comments on this, they said, quote, the NRA could have written his address. Al Jazeera is covering it as a straight news story, but they also published a piece about, Trump saying, oh, this was an act of pure evil, but not terrorism. Really? Or is it? I mean, we don't know this guy's motive yet. And I suppose for something to be called terrorism, you have to have an element of trying to change people's behavior. But how can we call our society free if we're not safe to go outside without getting shot at? We've got a bunch of other stuff in the news, too, we're going to get to. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Chuck, watching Free Speech on DirecTV in Cobb Mountain, Georgia. Hey, Chuck, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
I do. What's up, Chuck?
Hi. I'm in Cobb Mountain, California, actually.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I love your show. I recorded every program because I discovered you 5 years ago. And although I'm totally opposed to some of your views on religion and science, your political commentary is excellent. Okay.
All right. What?
And what I call about, I got really upset yesterday. Okay, now I agree it's far too easy to get guns. Okay, but you talk about that Social Security disability insurance,
right? And
well, it seemed I'm not in favor of a blanket ban on everybody who receives Social Security disability insurance because not everybody. It seemed like you made it sound like everybody is severely mentally ill who's on Social Security disability. And that's not true.
No, what I said, and I'll say it again, Chuck, there are roughly 75,000 Americans who are so severely disabled by their mental illness that they're unable to work and qualify for Social Security disability insurance. And if any of those 75,000 people are going to apply for a permit to own a gun, at the very least, I think it would be reasonable to have the psychiatrist or psychologist who certified that their mental illness was so severe that it prevented them from working, also to personally certify and take responsibility for asserting that, however, they may be too mentally ill to work, but they're not too mentally ill to own a gun. If a psychiatrist wants to say that, I don't have a problem with it. But I
understand on a case-by-case basis, yes. Right. I've been on Social Security disability for some time now. I've never had a mental illness in my life.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about somebody who's on Social Security disability because they hurt their back.
Oh, okay. No, but
I am only talking about people who are who are claiming that the reason why they are disabled is because they are mentally ill. And I see no stigma associated with that. There are people who, particularly with things like PTSD, from going off to Iraq and Afghanistan, or just life's experiences. There are legitimate, depression, another one, bipolar disorder. There's a number of, in some cases, debilitating mental illnesses. They don't mean that people are bad people. It doesn't mean that they should be ostracized. But in some cases, particularly if suicidal ideation is part of it or homicidal ideation, I don't think they should be able to buy a gun.
Right. I agree with you on a case-by-case basis, but not a blanket ban on everybody who receives Social Security disability. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I think the blanket ban was a flag. I'm not sure if during the Obama administration people, the Social Security disability, the Social Security Administration was able to give that information to the FBI for their database. Now, exactly how that works or was supposed to work, I'm not even sure it was working. I'm not sure that it actually got put into place, but whether the person. Pardon?
You can't take away the other person's right to bear arms if they're not severely mentally ill. So it should be on a case-by-case basis. That was all I was trying to say.
Yeah, if they want to bear that cost, I disagree with the idea that we all have a right to bear arms. This was prior to 98, 88, whatever year Heller was decided. It was in the 90s. There was no individual right to own arms. It's never been. The Supreme Court had rejected that argument over and over and over again. 2008 was the Heller decision. Yeah, it's just been since 2008 that the Supreme Court discovered this right to bear arms. I still don't agree with it. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tom Baggioni, writing at the Raw Story website. Internet pounds NRA's silence after Las Vegas massacre. It's amazing. 59 people dead, 500 people wounded. The NRA has tweeted, well, they haven't posted anything since September 29th, apparently. Robert tweets, the NRA spent $30 million to get Trump elected. No need to wait and see what side of the gun argument he will side with after this. Will Bunch, where's the NRA's despicable Dana Loesch with her insane videos calling for domestic warfare? Boy, Will is not feeling charitable today. Governor Sandoval tweets, a tragic and heinous act of violence. Our prayers are with the victims. Roe responds saying the NRA feed is quiet today. Fox News, it just didn't stop, witness described Vegas. Yosef responds to Fox News saying the NRA lost a member perched in that 32-floor room. Well, I don't know if he's a member or not. But Scott says, and why won't the Vegas shooter be considered a terrorist? Because he's white. I don't know why. Because we're being held hostage by the NRA? He writes. And yeah, somebody is asking, will the NRA use the Las Vegas shooting as a marketing tool? They don't have to. I mean, the stocks of the gun makers went up 6 and 7% yesterday. We reported that on our program. Bruce Bartlett tweets, the Republicans are desperate. The NRA has not yet told them what to say about the Vegas shooting. Need talking points fast. Right. A cat named Bitches tweets, it takes the NRA a while to tweet on mornings like this. They have to clean the blood off their hands so they don't get their keyboard all messy. Heather Whaley points out the NRA wants to pass a bill allowing the legal purchase of silencers. People ducked and ran in Vegas because of the sound of gunfire. Oh, so let's have silent gunfire now. Yes. Seriously, Paul Ryan was going to pull that thing up for a vote this week in the House of Representatives. Now, whether he still does or not, could be interesting. Another, John Hurt tweets, another one of the well-regulated militia and one of the NRA's former good guys with a gun falls out of line in Las Vegas. Right. Worst mass shooting in U.S. history. At least mass shooting of white people. We have to keep pointing that out. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Oh, there's an amazing report about the economy that the Trump administration just took off their website. I got to tell you about this. And what's going on at the UN is going to blow your mind.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler. General Butler in 1935, when he wrote this book, had just retired from the U.S. Marine Corps as the most decorated, or one of the most decorated soldiers in American history. He was that generation's Dwight Eisenhower. In 1914, he helped capture Veracruz, Mexico. In 1917, he helped capture Fort Revere and thus Haiti. He'd received the Distinguished Service Medal in 1919. So anyhow, here's the book. War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it's about.
It's a benefit conducted for the benefit. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. In World War I, a mere handful garnered the profits of the conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during that World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains in their income tax returns. How many other millionaires falsified their tax returns? No one knows. How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried a bayonet thrust of an enemy? How many of them were wounded or killed in battle? Out of war, nations acquire additional territory if they're victorious. They just take it. This newly acquired territory promptly is exploited by the few, the self-same few who wrung dollars out of blood in the war. The general public shoulders the bill. And what is that bill? This bill renders a horrible accounting. Newly placed gravestones, mangled bodies, shattered minds, broken hearts and homes, economic instability, depression and all its attendant miseries, back-breaking taxation for generations and generations. For a great many years as a soldier, I had a suspicion that war was a racket. Not until I retired to civilian life did I fully realize it. Now that I see the international war clouds gathering as they are today, I must face it and speak out. Again, they are choosing sides. France and Russia met and agreed to stand side by side. Italy and Austria hurried to make a similar agreement. Poland and Germany cast sheep's eyes at each other, forgetting for the nonce, one unique occasion, their dispute over the Polish corridor. The assassination of King Alexander of Yugoslavia complicated methods. Yugoslavia and Hungary, long bitter enemies, were almost at each other's throats. Italy was ready to jump in, but France was waiting, and so was Czechoslovakia. All of them are looking ahead to war. Not the people, not those who fight and pay and die, only those who foment wars and remain safely at home to profit. There are 40 million men under arms in the world today, and our statesmen and diplomats have the temerity to say that war is not in the making. Hell's bells. Are these 40 million men being trained to be dancers? Not in Italy, to be sure. Premier Mussolini knows what they're being trained for. He at least is frank enough to speak out. Only the other day, Il Duce in International Conciliation, the publication of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said, quote, "And above all, fascism, the more it considers and observes the future and the development of humanity, quite apart from political considerations of the moment, believes neither in the possibility nor the utility of perpetual peace. War alone brings up to its highest tension all human energy and puts the stamp of nobility upon the people who have the courage to meet it." End of quote from Mussolini. Undoubtedly, Mussolini means exactly what he says. His well-trained army, his great fleet of planes, and even his navy are ready for war, anxious for it, apparently. His recent stand at the side of Hungary and the latter's dispute with Yugoslavia showed that, and the hurried mobilization of his troops to the Austrian border after the assassination of Dollfuss showed it too. There are others in Europe whose saber-rattling presages war sooner or later. Herr Hitler with his rearming Germany and his constant demands for more and more arms, as if is an equal, if not greater menace to peace. France only recently increased the term of military service for its youth from a year to 18 months. Yes, overall, nations are camping in their arms. The mad dogs of Europe are on the loose. In the Orient, the maneuvering is more adroit. Back in 1904, when Russia and Japan fought, we kicked our old friends the Russians and backed Japan. Then our very generous international bankers were financing Japan. Now the trend is to poison us against the Japanese. What does this open door policy to China mean to us? Our trade with China is about $90 million a year. For the Philippine Islands, we spent about $600 million in the Philippines in 35 years. And we, our bankers and industrialists and speculators, have private investments there of less than $200 million. Then to save that China trade of about $90 million, or to protect those private investments of less than $200 million in the Philippines, we would be all stirred up to hate Japan and go to war, a war that might well cost us tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives of Americans, and many more hundreds of thousands of physically maimed and mentally unbalanced men. Of course, for this loss, there would be a compensating profit. Fortunes will be made. Millions and billions of dollars will be piled up by a few. War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler. That's amazing. Donald Trump, he said, it's what happened in Vegas. Well, here's the verbatim quote. What happened in Las Vegas is in many ways a miracle. Now, he was, to cut him some slack here, he was talking about how quickly the police were able to track this guy down. It took them over an hour, but, I'm not criticizing them. This has got to be every cop's nightmare. But, sometimes his language is a little jarring, shall we say. The Scottish government has permanently banned fracking. They've had a standing, a kind of on the edge of a ban going for a while. And I mentioned a couple of other news stories. I want to just cover these real quickly and then pick up your phone calls. The first is from the Washington Post yesterday by Catherine Rampell. And it's titled, "The Report Trump Officials Don't Want You to See." And what happened was, prior to, and I'm quoting from Catherine Rampell, this opinion writer in the Washington Post, is prior to 2008, everybody understood, I'm paraphrasing here, but everybody understood that when you raise or lower the corporate income tax, what you're doing is you're raising and lowering, or actually the reverse. When you raise or lower the corporate income tax, you're lowering or raising, the revenue goes to the owners of the capital, that is the shareholders. They own the company. They get the benefit of the profit from the company. So, but, that doesn't sell real well to the American people. Because the shareholders, 80% of the stock in the United States is held by fewer than 20% of Americans. Shareholders, by and large, are the rich. And so saying, we got to cut this corporate tax, it's going to help the shareholders, that's not, you can't sell something that way. And as I pointed out on over the weekend over at Alternet with my article about this long con that Republicans have been playing ever since Jude Wanniski came up with the two Santa Claus theory, that, hey, if Democrats can be the Santa Claus of Social Security and unemployment insurance, Republicans can be the Santa Claus of tax cuts, right? So they had to figure out a way to sell corporate tax cuts as something that would benefit you. Now, the main thing that they've tried is to say, well, if we cut the taxes of corporations, they'll hire new people with that money. But we have the experience of the Bush tax cut, the George W. Bush corporate, there was a substantial corporate tax cut. We have the experience of the Reagan tax cuts. And what we know from these things is that when you give corporations more money by reducing their taxes, or if you even want to use their language, if you let them keep more of their money, that does not translate into better jobs or more jobs or better paid jobs for working people. What it translates into is more money being stashed in offshore checking accounts by fat cats at the top and by the shareholders. So they've come up with this new way of saying, hey, in 2012, they actually did some research and they said, when you raise corporate taxes, 82% of that additional tax is going to be borne by the capital owners, by the shareholders. But 18% of that is going to be borne by labor. In other words, the company's not going to be able to raise wages because they have to pay more money in taxes. So they actually came up with a formula that made a certain amount of sense to say, yeah, when you raise companies' taxes, it hurts labor as well as it hurts shareholders. Now, this doesn't, put it in the context of the help to a larger society and, the stuff that's necessary to keep the company going and all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, 18% labor. So then Steve Mnuchin, the former Goldman guy, now our Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin goes on Fox News and says, and I quote, "Most economists believe that over 70% of corporate taxes are paid for by the workers." End quote. No, he just made that up, pulled it out of his backside. At an event in Kentucky, he declared, quote, over 80% of business taxes is borne by the worker, end quote. So when they said that, people started pointing out that the Treasury Department had this study published on their website back in 2012 that suggested that 18% of corporate taxes, the so-called burden, was borne by the workers. So what did Mnuchin do? They took the study down. We don't like what we said, so we're not going to tell you. It's incredible. Meanwhile, the United Nations floated a resolution condemning the death penalty for gay people, for LGBT people, trans folks, for the whole spectrum, right? There are a number of countries right now, Saudi Arabia is probably the most prominent, where if you are caught being or behaving gay in public, you are subject to execution. And in fact, recently the Saudi police tortured 2 transgendered people to death. And that story is out there. There's a great piece in The Atlantic, actually, about homosexuality in Saudi Arabia as well. But Glenn Greenwald pointing this out, it was a resolution that's, quote, condemns the imposition of the death penalty as a sanction for specific forms of conduct such as apostasy, however you say that word, blasphemy, adultery, and consensual same-sex relations. The U.S., there's before the United Nations, a resolution saying, we, the countries of the world, think that killing gay people for being gay is wrong. The U.S. voted against this resolution. We were one of only 30-some-odd countries to do so. It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. So, anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Jackie in Wellington, Colorado. Hey, Jackie, what's on your mind? Jackie, let's see, on Sirius XM in Wellington. Okay, I'm going to put Jackie on hold. She's on line 1, Chris, if you want to check that out. David in Chicago. Let's try this. Hey, David, can you hear me? Uh-oh. We had this problem yesterday, too, didn't we? We've already taken. Ricardo, can you hear me? In Ontario, California? This is not a good sign. Anita? Anita can't hear me? Okay, if we can't, yeah, we've got to reboot the system. Chris, I'm quitting out of my software here. Remarkable. So while that's going on, let me tell you about some other stories that this is the other one that I thought, actually there's 2 of them that I really wanted to share with you. You know, I pointed out that last week that Rick Perry has asked FERC, the federal agency that regulates, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that regulates energy prices in the United States, to raise the cost of electricity coming out of coal-fired power plants and nuclear plants so as to subsidize the coal-fired power plants and the nuclear plants, right? And this is, I read it to you on the air and shared my personal shock and outrage. Rick Perry officially wants us to subsidize the coal and nuclear industries. And, well, yeah, of course. I mean, the guy's been a shill for these industries his whole life. What do you expect? But frankly, I was expecting a whole lot more outrage around the world, and I wasn't catching it. And here, this is from today's Financial Times. It was originally published in Bloomberg, I believe, or the photograph is from Bloomberg. There's a copyright Bloomberg notice on this, but I think that's for the photograph. This says, it was written yesterday by Ed Crooks in New York. A legal battle over the future of the U.S. electricity system is looming after the Trump administration shocked the industry with proposals for new subsidies for coal-fired and nuclear power plants. If implemented, the plan could mean the most radical shakeup of the market in decades. That's what I'd been saying. I was like, this is incredible. This guy, he wants to increase. I mean, we're already subsidizing coal and nuclear hugely, right? There's not a single nuclear plant in the United States that would even be running today if it wasn't for the Anderson Act, the Price-Anderson Act, which makes the federal government the insurer of last resort. Right? The federal government is providing the insurance for nuclear power plants all across the United States. Just that simple. And and it's a huge subsidy because, there was literally no insurance company in the world that was willing to, on their own, 100% responsibility, insure a nuclear power plant in the United States for any amount of money. So we're completely subsidizing nuclear, and we're subsidizing coal. And, I was just astonished by this. But so now Rick Perry, the Energy Secretary, on Friday sent a proposal to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission calling for payments to power plants and defined these in a way that means only coal and nuclear generators are likely to qualify. Travis Kuvala, a Republican vice chairman of the utility regulator for Montana, said Mr. Perry was proposing to move U.S. power markets from competition to a command and control system. Miles Farmer, a lawyer for the National Resources Defense Council and Environmental Group, described the plan as insane. Paul Bailey of the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity, well, you know how they're going to come out of it. I mean, there's literally no such thing as clean coal. So when they're naming their group the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity, right, an industry group, welcomed the move. Right, yes, please subsidize us. They say the plunging cost of renewable, this is from the article by Ed Crooks in the Financial Times. I'm jumping around in it. The plunging cost of renewable energy has made it increasingly difficult for aging coal and nuclear plants to compete in U.S. electricity markets. In 2008, coal provided 48% of U.S. electricity, but by last year it was down to just 30%. Now, Perry is saying that we should be throwing money at these coal plants because they're reliable. Well, the next sentence, in 2008, coal provided 48% of U.S. electricity, but by last year it was down to just 30%. There is no evidence that the reliability of the U.S. grid has deteriorated as a result. And then they talk about Jules Kortenhorst, chief executive of the Rocky Mountain Institute, which works with businesses to promote renewable energy, said Mr. Perry was planning to commit a coup in broad daylight in U.S. electricity markets, and it appears that that's the case. I mean, this is pretty amazing stuff. Meanwhile, India's got a completely different plan. By the way, I think that we fixed our phones, so you can try calling in again if you want to offer your thoughts on any of the topics that we've been talking about today. What do you think would be the best way to regulate guns in the United States? I'm still excited about my idea that we should regulate guns the same way we do cars. But do you have an alternative suggestion? Give us a shout.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. Welcome back. I'm going to just restart my my call screen software because I'm not showing any callers. Although it may just be that people just have not yet been put on the board. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I'm seeing them. Okay, so that's what I needed to do. Good. Patricia in, well, it doesn't say where you are, Patricia. Where are you calling from? Uh-oh. Same problem? Patricia, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was just turning down my TV.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You're on the air. Where are you calling from?
Thank you. I had the last time I called in was when Representative Pocan was on with you, and I haven't called in since because you jumped in on my comment that we should take on the sportsman community and the NRA on killing wildlife, the last third of wildlife on the planet since 1965, and the biodiversity crisis. And at that point, you jumped in and said, oh, taking on the sporting community is a political suicide. And so I haven't called in since because really are 5% of the population. And we take on the 30% that support Trump. And when you numb children to killing, small animals, big animals, right now 5,000 bears, mostly cubs, are being killed in Wisconsin. And I wake up to semi-automatic gunfire every morning on my rural property, watching my friends who live on my property being killed. And I can't go outside and walk my own property because of all this gunfire. And I live in constant misery that my friends are being killed. 5,000 bears. Do they matter nothing? I mean, I am really...
Have you posted your land, Patricia?
Pardon?
Have you posted your property?
Oh, sure, but these animals move. They're lured off to feedlots and farm fields that I cannot talk to them and warn them to stay on my property for 4.5 months. The bear season doesn't come this far south. I mean, they did kill 2 bears that happened to be in my central Wisconsin county, but the deer season now moved from 9 days to 4.5 months of bow hunting, which is silent.
Yeah.
And I can't protect anything. I mean, I think the most basic lack of democracy and violence in this country is in controlling our public lands for killing by funding state and federal wildlife and public lands agencies on killing licenses. It cannot stand. We have to reform that particular part.
There's actually, Patricia,
nature?
there's a piece of legislation that the Republicans are going to be proposing this week in Congress that would make it easier for hunters to hunt on public and fish on public land. That dramatically speeds up the permitting process and cuts the fees. And I think it's called the GO Act or something like that. But you might want to express your outrage to your politicians on that, Patricia, and join PETA. I mean, there's some great organizations out there speaking out against this kind of violence. Patricia, thank you for the call. Good luck. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Back. Okay, let's see if this thing's working now. Mick in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Mick, what's up?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey, Mick.
I'm not saying good morning anymore. I'm just saying morning to people. First of all, I called today. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I'm also a retired Navy veteran of 22 years.
Okay.
I'm completely disgusted and so saddened for what's happened in Las Vegas. And Tom, very simply, I think that the thing that we need to do, in my opinion, is to demand Congress to start an initiative for national registration, national insurance, training, and renewal And you know, I would tell my NRA brethren, this would be something that we should get involved in as an organization. My family goes back 4 generations of being members in the NRA because they were hunters. I'm from New York State, upstate, and there are a lot of deer there. And from the 1930s, I think, my grandfather was hunting deer up in northern New York State in the Adirondack Mountains. Why can't we do something like this? This
is what the NRA used to do.
That way.
This is what they used to do, Mick. I mean, you know, I was going through some drawers the other day, and I found my 2008 NRA membership card. I think that was the last year that I sent them anything for membership. I basically quit after that. And, you know, and I had originally joined back when I was writing in novels about private detectives and going through the Georgia Police Academy. And and they had some good firearms educational stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that if we were to say, if, you know, we're going to start treating guns like we treat cars, you know, this is not some big radical thing. We're just going to say, from the time it's manufactured until the time it's destroyed, it has a registration number and a human being or a company associated with that registration number. Number one.
That's right.
Number two, if you're going to use this car or this gun, you have to have a license to do so. And in order to get that license, you have to do 2 simple things. Number one, you have to demonstrate that you understand what it is you're using. You know, that you understand the rules of the road, essentially, you know, like a driver's license test. This red light means stop. And number two, that you have the proficiency to do it. You know, in getting your car, you have to drive the car around the driver's, you know, license bureau and prove to them that you can parallel park with a gun, prove that you know how to use the thing without killing yourself or someone else. And number three, that you have to have liability insurance. It is crazy that if those 59 people in Vegas had been killed by a drunk driver on a spree, Geico would be writing $1 million checks to 59 people. And right now you've got instead 59 people who are facing substantial hospital bills. I mean, it costs on average $100,000 in the United States to treat a gunshot wound. That's typically what it costs when you add in ER time and you know, transportation and recovery and physical therapy and everything else. Your average gunshot wound in the United States is $100,000, and these people are getting absolutely nothing from anybody, and that's wrong. So,
yeah,
what do you think?
The insanity of the inaction of, you know, our government representatives. I don't even like to call them that anymore. Just in general terms, the inaction here has basically brought us to this point where now, the demographics, let's put it that way. Now the demographics are going to be looked at seriously and all, when in Sandy Hook, the demographics there were just shunted aside. A lot of nice things like they're saying right now, prayers and thoughts and everything, not going to bring those people back. And there's 500 plus people that are injured. Who knows how many more are not going to be, you know, not going to make it, you know.
Yeah, this is serious stuff. Mick, thanks for the call. And thanks for your rational perspective. I appreciate
it. You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is toward the very end, and it's a chapter titled Transforming Culture Through Politics. Many think it's just to fund tax cuts and subsidies for the rich, that the multimillionaire CEOs who've taken over almost all senior posts in government are just pigs at the trough. And this is a spectacular but ordinary form of self-serving corruption. It all seems so plausible, and there's even a grain of truth to it. But juicy deals for right-wing government insiders and their friends are just a byproduct of the real and deeper war against democracy. The neoconservatives are perfectly happy for us to think that they're just opportunists skirting the edges of legality and morality. But this is far more dangerous than simple government corruption. Indeed, the neoconservatives claim to be anti-government. As a leading spokesman for the neocon agenda, Grover Norquist told National Public Radio's Mara Liasson in a May 25, 2001 Morning Edition interview, quote, "I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub," end quote. Without a larger view, the issues of domestic spending, oil, neoconservative power plays in both major parties, the loss of liberties, anti-government rhetoric, and war in the Middle East all seem like separate and unconnected events. They're not. The new conservatives who've seized the Republican Party and who, through the Democratic Leadership Council, are nipping at the heels of the Democratic Party are not our parents' conservatives. Historic conservatives like Barry Goldwater, Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower would be appalled, although their philosophical roots go back to Alexander Hamilton, who openly argued during the Constitutional Convention that royalty was the best form of government. The neocons have always been kept to the fringe. Indeed, the Reagan-Bush revolution flew in the face of traditional conservative ideals. As John Stockwell notes in his book, The Praetorian Guard, the U.S. Role in the New World Order, Reagan and Bush were proud of their contempt for their concerns of environmentalists, with Reagan once saying, "If you've seen one redwood, you've seen them all." Their Department of the Interior under James Watt sold off minerals and forests to campaign contributors at fire sale prices, and their EPA in many cases moved from prosecuting corporate polluters to legitimizing and protecting them under the guise of regulation. Although James Madison wrote in 1792 that an important role of government was to promote a strong middle class, quote, "by the silent operation of the laws, which, without violating the rights of property, reduce extreme wealth toward a state of mediocrity and raise extreme indigence toward a state of comfort," end of quote from James Madison. That was not a sentiment shared by those in the Reagan-Bush revolution. Instead, Reagan raised taxes on the middle class and working people while cutting taxes by more than 60% for the most wealthy in America. At the same time, he bragged that he'd eliminated more than 1,000 programs for poor people and even proposed that poor school children should be content with ketchup as their daily vegetable. At the same time, the Reagan-Bush administration and later the George W. Bush administration worked hard to roll back the very individual liberties that America's founders had fought and died for. Dwight Eisenhower left office warning Americans about the dangers of the concentration of power resulting from corporations getting into bed with the military. But the Reagan-Bush and W. Bush administrations openly embraced these corporate powers, inviting them into the halls of governance and hungrily sucking at the teat of their campaign contributions. In the past, those promoting what is now called the New Conservative Agenda went by different names. The founders of America knew that for 6,000 years, civilized human beings had been ruled by one of three groups: kings, theocrats, or feudal lords.
Kings held power by virtue of the threat of violence and continual warfare. Theocrats and popes held power by the people's fear of a god or gods, and feudal lords by wealth and the power that comes from throwing average people into poverty. The new idea of our founders in 1776 was to throw off all three of these historic tyrannies and replace them with a fourth way, the people being ruled by themselves, a government that derived its legitimacy and continuing existence solely from the approval of its citizens. Government of, by, and for we the people. They called it a constitutional Republican democracy. What we are seeing now in the conservative agenda is nothing less than an attempt to overthrow Republican democracy and replace it with a worldwide feudal state. The last time this happened, the feudalists took over a monarchy in North America. In December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I chartered the East India Company, ultimately leading to a corporate takeover of the Americas for the colonists that ended with the Boston Tea Party and 3 years later, the American Revolution. The corporate state partnership of the East India Company and the UK went on to conquer India, but eventually disintegrated as the British Empire faded and the British government, along with most of Western Europe, embraced somewhat more Jeffersonian forms of democracy. Conservatism raised its head again in the 20th century, revived by Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini. The Italian dictator even used the word corporatism to describe it and then later renamed it as fascism, a word defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as, quote, a system of government that exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership together with belligerent nationalism. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with me, Julio Rivera, the editorial director of Reactionary Times, columnist with Newsmax, Right-Wing News, and Politichicks, and reactionarytimes.com, the website. You can tweet him at, oh yeah, it's Julio. OHYEAHITSJULIO. Hey, Julio. What's up?
How are you today, Tom?
I am fine, thank you. So we have this horrible shooting going on in Vegas, and I'm asking just this really simple question. In the 19-teens, when cars started going fast enough that they could kill people, and it was regularly happening, as well as horses, killing horses, we decided, we need some common sense regulations of these things because people are dying. And so we came up with this three-part system. There were pieces around it, things like, red, green, yellow for lights and, stop signs as an octagon and all that. But the three principal parts were, if you want to be a driver, number one, the car has to be registered from the time it's manufactured until the time it's destroyed so that there's always a chain of custody. We always know whose car it is. Number two, you have to prove that you understand the roads, the rules of the road. You have to pass a written test. You know what that red light means. And you have to prove that you actually know how to drive a car. You have to pass a proficiency exam. And number three, you have to have liability insurance so that if you kill somebody, even by accident, they're not totally screwed. I think it's completely crazy that 59 people are going to be facing an average of $100,000 hospital bill each, because it's the average cost to get shot in the United States with the ER and everything else. That, 59 people are going to be facing, $5.9 million worth of medical bills. And, if Geico... If the killer had killed 59 people, with a car as a crazed drunk driver, Geico would be writing $5.9 million worth of checks right now. And instead, these people are having to deal with this, with absolutely nothing. So what's wrong with my plan, Julio?
Well, listen, first of all, the left has been really quick, and I guess you're part of that, to politicize this event. I agree that we should.
What's political about what I'm suggesting?
Well, let me just go ahead and finish though, Tom. We should go ahead and close the loophole so that people cannot any longer purchase guns, at a gun show without going through some semblance of a background check. We do need that, but automatic weapons in this country were basically banned, since 1986. So as far as people obeying the law, people that are crazed criminals and are psychopathic and want to kill, in mass, like what we just experienced, they don't care about the law, first of all. So more laws restricting, law-abiding gun owners isn't necessarily going to help here.
That's the exact opposite of the logic that you guys use when it comes to drugs. You say, if with guns, if you ban guns, only criminals are going to get guns. But with drugs, if you ban drugs, you're going to stop people from using drugs.
No, what you do is you enforce immigration law and you keep a lot of the drugs out of this country that way. That's one way of doing it. So
then let's talk about keeping the guns out. If you don't want to talk about, licensing gun owners and registering guns and insuring gun owners, because you're not responding to what I suggested. But what you are saying is, hey, how many guns do we have and all this kind of thing. Why would any country allow weapons of war to be sold to civilians?
Well, they don't allow weapons of war. Listen, the Armalite rifle, the AR-15, which people, mistakenly, categorize as an assault rifle. It's not an assault rifle 15. It's an Armalite rifle. It's a sporting rifle. It's not an automatic weapon. It's not designed for mass shootings like what we just saw in Las Vegas. This is completely misguided.
It absolutely is, Julio. It was developed as a military rifle. This is just the civilian version of it in as much as it's got a little softer contours and it doesn't have a full automatic mode.
Listen, that weapon that was used in Las Vegas was an automatic weapon. How he procured it and the details behind that is going to come out.
Oh no, he was using a bump. He was using they've got these contraptions that you drop the gun into, basically.
That's what they're saying. There's a lot of different things that you can use to modify some weapons. Some are legal.
But the question is, why are we allowing weapons of war? Listen, I shoot guns recreationally, but I don't need to be shooting an AR-15. I can.
Why not? I mean, why not? If you want to shoot an AR-15,
because it's bad for society. Because 59 people just died.
If you pass a background check and you're mentally stable and you don't have a criminal history of violence, there's nothing really prohibiting you from going ahead and owning a sporting rifle that's a semi-automatic weapon.
My point, I don't disagree with that, but if this guy, you know what a duck load is, Julio?
A duck load?
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Okay, well, there's basically rules for sporting. And one of the rules when you're hunting ducks, when you're shooting ducks, is you don't get more than either 2 or 3 shots. I forget which it is. I've never been a hunter, but I have friends who are. And so a duck load is the way that you load your shotgun. So that it's not possible to have more than those 2 or 3 shots, so that you're not playing an unfair game, right? You and the duck, or you and the people you're competing against. I don't see why somebody needs something with a 50-shot magazine in order to hunt ducks, or for that matter, to shoot skeet.
If you look at the spirit of the Second Amendment and why it was incorporated into the Bill of Rights and into the Constitution, it was to defend the private citizen, possibly against a tyrannical government. So
Julio, that's complete BS.
Tyrannical government with
Julio,
a 9.
Stop for a second, respectfully. I will, bow down to you and apologize to you on national television if I'm wrong about this. But I have read Madison's notes on the Constitution. I have read the Federalist Papers. I've written books about them. I've read the debates, particularly Patrick Henry's huge debate during the Virginia Ratifying Convention about the Second Amendment, specifically about the Second Amendment. I've written several articles about this.
Let me say Nazi Germany.
Nowhere.
What happened in Nazi Germany after they took away the
Hitler encouraged people to own guns.
What happened?
Hitler encouraged people to own guns, and those people showed up at beer halls and intimidated people. That's what happened. Hitler loosened the gun laws that were the old Weimar Republic gun laws. He forbade Jews owning guns, but this is not about Hitler.
And this is why 6 million of them were killed as a result of the Holocaust.
There is none of our founders ever
I understand
in their wildest dreams. And I'm telling you, Julio, if you tried to take on the U.S. government with Black Hawk helicopters and special forces and SWAT teams, I don't care how many guns you've got. They're going to eat your lunch. They're just going to bust your ass.
Listen, ultimately, at the end of the day, any citizen who's sane, and I believe I'm all for the registration of guns. Your whole little diatribe there at the beginning when you were discussing and the parallels between, you know, a vehicle, a motor vehicle, and a gun, it makes perfect sense. I agree with you, Tom. We're on the same page with that. You should have to register a gun, and we should track its chain of custody from when it's created all the way until when it's, you know, decommissioned, or if, you know, what have you. But anybody who is, you know, of sane mind can pass a background check, goes through gun safety courses and whatnot, should be able to go ahead and own a firearm.
Who needs though more than 7 or 9 bullets?
Why put a limit on it? Why?
Because the more bullets you have, the more destruction you can cause. There was a guy in I think it was in China, in Hong Kong, a couple of days ago, who tried to go on a mass killing spree with a knife. He wounded one guy and killed another. I mean, that's as far as he got.
Listen, Tom, if you have people that come into your home, let's say you have a problem with somebody, a gang or something. Let's say it's you live somewhere on the border and you're trying to take on the corruption with the drug gangs that are being allowed into this country, you know, because of the obvious, quite frankly.
Well, let's say I live next door to somebody from the planet Xenu, and they can
enforce immigration laws. If you have a gang coming into your house and it's multiple people with firearms, you're going to need a whole hell of a lot than 9 bullets.
I guarantee you, if you try to take on a gang coming into your house, you're going to lose.
Not necessarily.
And if you try to do it with a gun, you're crazy.
You are and how many rounds you have in your magazine.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds to me like we're agreeing that we can treat guns like cars. And that's a pretty big deal. You realize the NRA is opposed to all that.
I understand that. Yeah.
But what we're disagreeing on is high capacity magazines. Mm-hmm. Basically, that seems to be where we're disagreeing.
I think high-capacity magazines are not necessarily a problem as long as all those checks and balances are put into place and we know exactly.
But this guy bought these guns legally, and he was not on anybody's list.
What was that?
This guy, as far as we can tell, the early reports are that this guy bought at least some of these guns totally legally. He passed the background checks. He's got no history.
Well, there's some issues, I think, with loopholes as far as, you know, with selling guns.
This wasn't loopholes. This just, you know, this guy had no background that was a flag.
Well, we don't know that completely.
No,
yet.
obviously,
we have to let the dust settle and find out exactly all the facts.
But see,
go ahead and pass judgment on
let's just say that every now and then somebody with nothing in their history to warn us is going to go nuts and kill as many people as they possibly can.
They could do that.
Why should we give them guns that allow them to kill 59 people rather than 5 people?
Listen, they could do that with a pressure cooker. They could do that in a lot of different ways. Obviously, you know, you might have some things that slip through the cracks, but I don't think that you punish, you know, in this country, I believe we have something around like close to 100 million legal gun owners that are law abiding. Why should they be punished?
No, there's nothing close to 100 million. There's over 100 million guns, but there's
there's about 300 million guns in this country that are legally owned and registered.
Yeah, you're right. It's about the population of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, it's it just seems to me crazy that we as I said, that you asked the question, you know, why would I want to ban high capacity magazines? Because the only thing that high capacity magazines do is increase the ability of somebody to kill a lot of people really fast before they can get stopped.
Well, again, if we have if the proper system is in place. And, you know, it's being executed faithfully.
Wait a minute. When were you a fan of government systems?
What was that?
Are you saying that if the government systems are appropriate, everything's good?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, you're always going to have people that slip through the cracks. Listen, he could have rented a giant truck and drove it right through where they were having that concert.
He could have had a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile, you know, and he could have easily killed more than 59 people. Oh, wait a minute. You can't own or buy or sell a surface-to-air missile in the United States, can you?
I don't understand that.
Maybe that's why he didn't have one.
There. Why would you even present that into the argument?
Because it is a weapon of war designed to kill people, just like these high-capacity clips and these.
Listen, the gun that he had,
weapons.
Still don't know 100% sure what weapons he had. He supposedly had bags of weapons. He had multiple weapons.
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly what he used, how he procured it, or what the situation was. But
okay, Julio, we got to wrap it up. Julio Rivera, hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can tweet Julio at it's Julio, and reactionarytimes.com, the website. Julio, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate it.
Good talking with you. We'll be back.
Welcome back. Anita in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Anita, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm fine. What's on your mind?
I really am tired of these gun nuts, like this guy that you just spoke to. They seem to think it's only about their rights. What about my rights?
Yep.
To walk outside, to walk to the mall, to go to a movie, to go to a concert, to go to church, to just enjoy my life without being afraid that I'm going to be shot or shot at, or that my child can't go to a movie or go to school, and I have to worry about sending my child to school because who knows, some nut may go in there and start shooting people. There's so much more. There's how many deaths a year by gun? 30,000 deaths a year. How many times have we heard about gangs of foreigners breaking into people's houses? These people are cowards. They need a gun everywhere they go. Yeah. They need a gun to go to Target and hang out at the diaper section to intimidate people. Are you kidding me? Or go to Sonic? Because people showed up at the Sonic down my street carrying long guns.
Jeez.
Why?
Well,
don't I have a right to go to Sonic without being, confronted with people with guns?
Yeah, well, the next time you see a guy walking around with a long gun like that, just walk by him and in a real friendly voice with a nice smile say, "Small penis, huh?"
Well, yes, exactly. That's part of the problem. But I do have. This is the thing. They seem to think their rights are more important than my rights. Yeah. And why can't we sue these gun manufacturers? They market these little...
Because the Republicans passed a law making it almost impossible to sue them.
Well, I know.
And the Supreme Court upheld it.
That needs to be repealed.
I agree.
No, I don't know if the Supreme Court upheld it, but I can tell you
did.
They're manufacturing these guns as guns of war.
Yeah, and by the way, the Supreme Court did not rule that it was a good law. They simply ruled that it was not unconstitutional. The law basically limits the liability that gun manufacturers can be exposed to in a courtroom. And the Supreme Court said, yes, that's constitutional for the United States Congress to define the limits of liability in a lawsuit. But the Congress could just as easily have expanded the liability options for which a gun company could be sued in a courtroom.
And the ammo manufacturers.
Oh, yeah. Right, all the way up and down the chain.
Why do these people have so many guns? 3% of all guns are owned, 50% of all guns are owned by 3% of the population. Why do they need so many friggin' guns? Yeah. Why do they need thousands of...
I think that you're looking at, with the gun people who qualify as gun nuts, the ones who own 5, 10, 15, 20 guns or more. I think that you're looking at something like you're looking at with some billionaires and their money. You're looking at hoarding. You're looking at this obsessive compulsive behavior that among very poor people shows up as hoarding newspapers and tin cans. Among very wealthy people shows up as compulsive, money making. And for somebody in the upper middle class, it's enough to buy a new $1,000 gun every couple months.
It's also some paranoia. I know deer hunters. I live in Texas. They don't own more than 1 or 2 guns, and usually they inherited those.
Yep.
So, these people, there's a level of paranoia. I don't know how many of these guns they think they're going to be able to use at one time.
Yeah.
But they hoard guns and they hoard ammunition.
They are hoarding, and that's why I say I think it's a hoarding behavior. Anita, thank you for the call. I got to move along here, but thank you. We'll be back.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about vehicles of change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This piece in The Guardian here. Johns Hopkins study of gun violence surveys emergency room admissions. If lost wages are added, really startling costs rise to $45 billion a year. But just the cost of treating people in hospitals for gunshot wounds in the United States is $2.8 billion a year. $2.8 billion. The average cost for, there are 100,000 people who are affected. The estimates of firearm injuries cost $700 million in hospitalizations. Yeah, here we go. The average charge, if you stay overnight in the hospital and you have to go through the ER, is $95,000. About a third of inpatient gunshot victims were discharged to another medical facility. That's another $179,000 cost. And yeah, it's just amazing how many people who are shot. Nearly half, 49.5% of patients who arrived at the emergency department after being shot were victims of assault, accounting for 348,000 patients. Wow. Wow. This is nuts. Jackie in Wellington, Colorado. Hey, Jackie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call today. It's an honor to speak with you.
Thank you. Back at you.
Thanks. I have called all of my senators today, my representatives in districts near me. I'm in northern Colorado, so we're really, well aware of mass shootings. Mm-hmm. And I want to know what else can be done. I took my 9-year-old twins to the movies Friday night. And every time the door creaked open during the movie, every adult's head in the theater jumps, looking, who is it?
Is it James Holmes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, I barely take my kids in Colorado to the movies anymore. And I know lots of my friends do the same thing because you're scared.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you looked into,
from Aurora.
Jackie, forgive my interrupting you, but I just got a 30-second cue here. Have you looked into Gabby Gifford's charity? I don't know that much about it, but there are, she's got this thing that she started to help have gun safety laws. Do you know about that?
No, I don't. I know she's an advocate. I'll absolutely look into it. I'm donated and try to be involved with Moms Demand Action.
Yeah.
But the time for the NRA has passed.
I agree.
I mean, they're a terrorist organization. Whatever they were before, that's what they've evolved into.
Well, they certainly, their policies are certainly terrorizing America. Jackie, thank you for the call. And let me know when you do check around and look around at various charities and whatnot. Let me know what you come up with, Jackie.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Fight for the Four Freedoms, What Made FDR and the Greatest Generation Truly Great, by Professor Harvey J. Kaye, who's a professor of democracy and justice studies at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. This is from the introduction, page 1. We need to remember what conservatives have never wanted us to remember and what liberals have all too often forgotten. Now, after more than 30 years of subordinating the public good to corporate priorities and private greed, of subjecting ourselves to widening inequality and intensifying insecurities, and of denying our democratic impulses and yearnings, we need to remember. We need to remember who we are. We need to remember that we are the children and grandchildren of the men and women who rescued the United States from the economic destruction of the Great Depression
and defended it against fascism and imperialism in the Second World War. We need to remember that we are the children and grandchildren of the men and women who not only saved the nation from economic ruin and political oblivion, but also turned it into the strongest and most prosperous country on earth. And most of all, we need to remember that we are the children and grandchildren of the men and women who accomplished all that in the face of powerful, conservative, reactionary, and corporate opposition, and despite all their own faults and failings, by making America freer, more equal, and more democratic than ever before. Now, when all they fought for is under siege, and we too find ourselves confronting crises and forces that threaten the nation and all that it stands for, now we need to remember that we are the children and grandchildren of the most progressive generation in American history. We are the children of the men and women who articulated, fought for, and endowed us with the promise of the four freedoms. On the afternoon of January 6, 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt went up to Capitol Hill to deliver his annual message to Congress. Just weeks earlier, he had defeated the Republican Wendell Willkie at the polls and won re-election to an unprecedented third term. But Roosevelt now faced a far greater challenge, one even more daunting than those he confronted in his first and second terms. Still stalked by the Great Depression, the United States was also increasingly threatened by the Axis power, Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, Imperial Japan. And with war already raging east and west, Americans had yet to agree about how to respond to the danger. The president, however, did not falter. He not only proceeded to propose measures to address the emergency, he gave dramatic new meaning to all men are created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we the people of the United States, a new birth of freedom, and government of the people, by the people, and for the people. FDR knew about crises, but he knew as well what Americans could accomplish even in the darkest of times. Born in 1882, he had grown up privileged, the son of New York Hudson River gentry. Yet long before becoming president, he had suffered serious defeats and setbacks, none more devastating than contracting polio in 1921 at the age of 39. The disease left him permanently unable to stand up or walk without assistance. However, supported by his wife Eleanor and other family members and friends, he had risen above the paralysis to become the most dynamic political figure in the United States. Moreover, his experiences and encounters in the course of doing so had reaffirmed and deepened his already powerful faith and confidence in God, in himself, and in his fellow citizens, all of which had enabled him, in the face of the worst economic and social catastrophe in the nation's history, to defiantly state that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and then go on to proclaim this generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny. Armed with this faith and confidence and propelled by the popular energies that his words and elections elicited, he determinedly pursued the initiatives of relief, recovery, reconstruction, and reform known as the New Deal. Together, president and people severely tested each other, made mistakes and regrettable compromises, and suffered defeats and disappointments. Nevertheless, challenging each other to live up to their finest ideals, Roosevelt and his fellow citizens advanced them further than either had expected or even imagined possible. Confronting fierce, conservative, reactionary, and corporate opposition, they not only rejected authoritarianism, but also redeemed the nation's historic purpose and promise by initiating revolutionary changes in American government and public life and radically extending American freedom, equality, and democracy. They subjected big business to public account and regulation, empowered the federal government to address the needs of working people, mobilized and organized labor unions, fought for their rights, broadened and leveled the we and we the people, established a social security system, expanded the nation's public infrastructure, improved the environment, cultivated the arts, and refashioned popular culture. And while much remained to be done, they imbued themselves with fresh democratic convictions, hopes, and aspirations. Standing before the American people and their assembled representatives that early January day, the president surely believed their rendezvous with destiny had come. He told them straightforwardly that Americans were now confronting a moment unprecedented in the history of the United States. A moment unprecedented because never before had American security been as seriously threatened from without. And he refused to appease those who threatened our nation's safety. The book is The Fight for the Four Freedoms by Harvey K.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Ricardo in Ontario, California. Hey, Ricardo, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What's up?
I totally agree with you. We need some sort of regulation. Heart goes out to the victims in Las Vegas. I actually have a friend that was there and was injured. Ontario, California is only a few miles from San Bernardino as well, where we had, as you all know, a terrorist attack.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy Hook happened not too long ago. Seems like just yesterday we were looking at children being rushed out of a school. And these things are all terrible. But I feel that when we talk about gun control, we are doing ourselves a disservice by not mentioning that the most violent aggressor against American people has been the United States government. We forget about things like Wounded Knee, where 300 people were killed. Waco, Texas, where 75 were killed, including women and children. And these were done by police agencies. Not too long ago, a publication, and I won't mention it because I don't know if I can, was talking about studies done by independent groups on fatalities caused by police shootings.
Mm-hmm.
And where police were self-reporting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 fatalities caused by police shooting a year, independent agencies consistently reported over 1,000 a year.
Right.
So I don't think it's fair to ask the American people to give up weapons, even if it is pointless, like you mentioned.
I think it's a false choice. And number one, I agree that, and in fact, I just tweeted this during the last break, that if we're going to call this thing the worst massacre in history, we need to make it clear we're talking about white history. And what I tweeted out was the Colfax Massacre and Wounded Knee, and both of which were larger than this. The Colfax Massacre was directed against African Americans in 1873, and Wounded Knee was directed against Native Americans. So, number one. But number two, I don't see why. It seems to me like you're suggesting that we have to make a choice between A or B, and there's a whole spectrum of options beyond just A and B. With regards to actual, reasonable, rational gun owners, what I've suggested, licensing, registration, and simple insurance is something that is common in Germany, for example, in most European countries. This is not uncommon. And frankly, there are, outside the insurance requirement, there's some states that do the same thing now, number one. And number two, my suggestion that we stop selling weapons of war, this is not a radical idea. This is something Ronald Reagan supported. This is something that George Bush the Elder supported. The assault weapon ban expired during George W. Bush's term. I think it expired in 2005. And was not renewed. It was a 10-year law. It was passed by budget reconciliation, and did not get renewed. But for 10 years, the Republic didn't falter or fail because people could not buy 50-shot clips and semi-automatic weapons, or semi-automatic high-capacity rifles. So I don't see what's wrong with this. It just seems like a reasonable thing. In terms of government and police violence, I acknowledge and respect what you're saying, Ricardo, but I think it's a whole separate issue. The larger issue of violence in American society is reflected in police violence towards us, and we see it not only in our streets and not only in our personal and lived realities, but we also see it in our entertainment shows, where over and over and over again, cops are, when they're the heroes of the show, they're treating suspects in ways that are unconstitutional and illegal, and yet they're praised for it. I mean, we've got some serious problems going all the way up and down the system. Ricardo, I've got to move along, but thank you for the call. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Well, the first thing is that your guest, what's his name?
Julio
Rivera?
Yeah, Julio.
Yeah. Well, he played all the standards that we hear after every one of these shootings, which no new laws will work. The Second Amendment was to fight against a tyrannical government. I want to ask him, when do I get to decide when the government's tyrannical? How if we decide that the Trump administration is tyrannical and we all start getting our guns out? Who actually coordinates that operation, or is it just one-off, everybody decides for themselves? Because when police get shot, like in Dallas, or in Texas, where I guess that was the five police officers shot. And everybody said, I mean, that's where you'd strike first, right? That's where you'd strike at the government first, at the police. But they say, oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So he played all the no way out of this situation. The most popular top 10 plays. Oh, we wouldn't have been 6 million Jews wouldn't have been killed in Germany. I think we're approaching that magnitude of people shot in American gun violence, aren't we?
I don't know. It's if we're losing 30,000 a year. I mean, but the population has grown quite substantially.
Yeah. We're in that magnitude of loss.
Yeah.
But the other thing is the paradoxes in logic, which is, well, when we have shooters like the Orlando nightclub or Sandy Hook, well, they got their guns legally, so what could we possibly have done about it? In this case, now, others have been said, and somebody said about this case, well, these were illegal guns, so he was breaking the law. So, see, laws don't help. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. This leads me to this thought. Okay, Mr. Rivera, you solve it. You figure it out. You want the gun rights unless you're willing to say that 6 people being shot dead and 50 people being shot in total is okay with you. That's just part of living in a free society. Then you start figuring out.
Well, that's what they're saying, Paul. That's what they're saying. They're saying we don't have a solution because we don't need a solution. This is freedom. In fact, if anything, we need more guns, they're saying.
Well, the only way to stop a bad guy on the 32nd floor of a hotel with a machine gun is a good guy with an RPG launcher, apparently.
Well,
this is
there you go.
That's where we're going with it.
I know, and if anybody had tried shooting anything up at that hotel, which is why the police didn't do it either, they came in from the inside. You'd be shooting civilians. You'd be shooting, hotel customers through their windows.
Right.
I mean,
they don't think, and I even heard this yesterday. This is not a big deal. The murder rate is actually going down.
Right.
So this false comparison that the murder rate is going down. Therefore, look at this. If the murder rate in this country was 0 and this happened, this would be an extraordinary event.
Right.
So don't tell me that the murder rate's going down. Therefore, this isn't that big of a deal. I want to remind people that these people who are injured, remember, Steve Scalise walked away from that shooting back in June, only to spend 6 weeks in intensive care because of infections. That's what the people that are wounded are going to face, all kinds of problems.
Yep.
So if Mr. Rivera thinks that all of his no-way solutions, then you figured out, Mr. Rivera. You and the Republicans, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump, this is on you because you're in the majorities, and this is the kind of America you think that the Second Amendment and the Founding Fathers intended for the Second Amendment, willy-nilly mayhem. I don't think so. I don't quite believe that.
I actually do think so. I think that is the position that they're taking, and they're doing it in exchange for cash. I mean, with regard to global warming, it's, okay, we will ignore all science, right? These are people who, if they went to their doctor and their doctor said, you've got cancer or you've got gonorrhea, gonorrhea is even easier. Just take this pill, right? And they wouldn't say, no, I think I'm skeptical of scientific opinion here. But they're willing to lie about, global climate change in order to keep getting money. And the NRA pumped $30 million into the last election. There's a lot of Republicans who know that they wouldn't be there without the NRA.
Tom, the position is the same. Okay, if you don't want to say that global climate change is caused by man, you still got salt water in your, you still got salt water washing up.
Well, it's like with tobacco. They're going to deny it. In 2000, Mike Pence was still writing op-eds talking about how tobacco and the association of tobacco and lung cancer had not been proven. Mike Pence, right? When he was lobbying for tobacco, and they're still saying this. I mean, tobacco is still a legal product in the United States. So and there's still people who make a lot of money selling it and seem to sleep just fine at night. Thank you very much. I mean, there's no shortage of sociopaths in American business. I just, I can't believe that suddenly people in the weapons industry are going to,
get a conscience or get a heart or wake up or whatever. They've got all their rationalizations. I mean, you've heard many of them from Julio, and those rationalizations are not going to go away.
Well, when they say it's too early to politicize this, I'm reminded of Sandy Hook when they said, "Oh, these poor families are still grieving. It's too early." But then when it was okay, when a few months had gone by, they decided it was okay to talk about Sandy Hook. What did they tell us? It's a false flag. It never happened.
Well, Alex Jones told us that.
Yeah. A lot of people believe that.
I don't know about a lot, but there's probably a few million. But that's we're a country of 300.
A few million is a lot.
Yeah, I know, and this is part of the problem, Paul, and that is that we've got a media landscape. The thing that boggles my mind is how this has completely sucked up all the air in the room, and nobody's talking about what's going on in Puerto Rico. Nobody's talking about Ajit Pai, about to destroy he gets to get reappointed first and then destroy net neutrality. There's so many other things going on as well. But Paul, you apparently have faith that the Republicans can come up with a solution. I don't have faith that they even have an interest in it. So anyhow, we'll see. Paul, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, and we're going to check in with Talk Media News. I believe it'll be Luke Vargas in just a minute. And welcome back. David in Pittsburgh, California. Hey, David, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up? David? David?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're on the air.
Yeah, Tom, I was just wondering, let me mute my TV here.
Thank you. It's always a good idea to mute your TV
Yeah, I just did.
Okay.
The question I have is, they confirmed Pai for the FCC chairmanship. What direction is the net neutrality going to go?
Well, Pai is already on record as saying that he wants to destroy net neutrality. They got three.
I know that. That's why I'm saying, what is Congress? I mean, how are we going to fight this issue? Now,
well, if he can't destroy net neutrality before his term ends, which I believe is at the end of the year, then
2 years. He's got a 2-year seat.
No, but he's got to be that seat has to be renewed. I thought his term expired in December.
No. He got confirmed for a 2-year period, and then his term is up.
Okay. I'm going to have to look this up then, because that conflicts with. But whatever it is, my understanding is that Ajit Pai wants to destroy net neutrality. He wants to do what Comcast and Verizon and AT&T want him to do, and he's hell bent for leather to do it. And if he can't accomplish it before he gets reappointed, then Donald Trump is going to try and reappoint him. And at which point, the Democrats in the Senate will have the opportunity to potentially block his nomination. So,
but they have to get control of the House.
Well, they have to get control of the Senate. Yeah, it's the Senate that does the confirmations. The House has no say in this.
True, you're right.
Yeah.
And how many seats are up in the Senate? 4, I think.
There are 8 Democrats and 20 some odd Republicans who are up for re-election in this coming election.
Okay, so the Democrats have got to get all 8 seats in order to...
And they've got to flip a couple of Republican seats.
Because what's happened is they have to vote, and they don't have the simple majority. They have to vote with a 60-vote clearance now.
Right, and I'm not sure if the rule change that Harry Reid did in order to overcome the Republican constant obstruction of Obama appointees, principally federal judges. I don't know if that is still in effect, and I know it's still in effect. I don't know if it will affect the FCC commissioner chair's appointment or not. I don't know if it makes it harder or easier. for Democrats to block that. You know, in other words, can they use the filibuster? Can they use 40 votes?
I think they can use the filibuster now.
Yeah,
because of the 60-vote rule.
Right. Well, that's the thing, because that 60-vote rule got waived on a whole bunch of different kinds of appointments by Harry Reid because the Republicans have been so badly abusing it. And now Mitch McConnell is talking about extending those waivers, making them even more expansive. So there are even more kinds of appointments that cannot be filibustered. And
it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this is going to turn out. But I'd like to have some more conversation. But you were talking about a lot of gun control things and stuff, and I was listening to the House floor debate this morning, and none of them were talking about gun control.
Yeah, what a surprise. What a surprise. David, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us from New York, the United Nations representative Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. Hey, Luke.
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
Great. Great to have you with us. You want to start with Iraq and Kurdistan?
Yes, I'd love to. I mean, we are now, 9 days out from the independence referendum that was held in Kurdistan. 90% voted in favor of independence there on about 80% turnout. And that's critical to remember as we talk about Catalonia in a minute. So overwhelming majorities of Kurds voted for independence. What we saw unfold last week was the Iraqi government saying, okay, if this is the way you're going to want to go, and bear in mind the Kurds have not declared independence, they've just held the referendum. They said, if you don't hand over all your international airports, namely in Erbil, then we are going to impose an air embargo, meaning no international flights going into Kurdistan can go there directly. They've got to be routed through Baghdad. So that's a pretty easy, simple way of sort of restricting the freedom of movement around Kurdistan. And what we saw today from the Iraqi parliament was the most severe thing they've done since then. It actually really goes well beyond the air embargo. The Iraqi parliament this morning did two things. They stripped all of the Kurdish legislators, parliamentarians from Kurdistan who sit in the parliament in Baghdad, stripped them of their legal immunity, meaning that they are basically clearing the way for these members of the Kurdish parliament to be brought to court for participating in a referendum violating the sovereignty of the Iraqi state. And the second thing that the parliament did today is they announced a plan, and we don't know all the details of it, to cut all financial ties with Kurdistan. They said this is not going to hurt the people of that region, but it is designed at hurting the government's ability to function. So we're probably looking at something that Iraq would do in concert with Turkey to the north, some sort of ruling that says, look, you're not going to get any oil revenue from those oil wells in northern Kurdistan, and basically try to bring the Kurdish government to its knees by taking away its revenue base. So the Iraqi government is moving very swiftly here, and I'll point out, so are the Kurds. They have declared presidential and parliamentary elections for November 1st. They're basically saying, our leadership wants independence. We are going to declare it eventually, but we want to have a vote first to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So they're going to create essentially a shadow government?
That's correct. Again, they said they're not going to declare independence before that election, but they want to get another vote for the president, Barzani, who I think in all likelihood will be reelected, and most of the parliamentarians will be reelected too. But just to sort of, as you see in many other parliamentary systems, right, you hold a plebiscite to try and get people on the same page, and that looks like they're sticking the course there.
Okay, so although it looks like it's going to be a difficult course, I mean,
I think we can't disregard the risk either, and it's long been talked about in the American foreign policy establishment going back decades, that should the Kurds ever move for independence, that Turkey would be willing to risk the international condemnation of invading northern Iraq. And that seems rather extreme, but I think...
And Syria may even get in on the act, too, because they've got a Kurdish population that they're very uncomfortable with.
Sure, I think it's less likely they would be able to really mount that kind of military campaign, right, and the Turks certainly wouldn't do it on behalf of Bashar Assad. But I do think the fact that we have been seeing the Turkish military mobilizing north of the Kurdish border with Iraq, I mean, that is a pretty clear sign they are ready to move in should they think the moment is ripe. And I think Turkey's real fear here about the Kurds even outweighs Iraq's, if that's possible.
So we've got this in the Middle East. Up in Europe, the Catalonian portion of Spain has just held a referendum. I believe they had about, 80% voter turnout, and well, you've got
No. So it was 9-1 again, much like the sort of results that came from Kurdistan. But you had 80% of turnout in Kurdistan, 42% in Catalonia. And so that's something the Spanish government, which is just deeply frustrated with this and doing everything they can, including deploying tens of thousands of sort of national police to go to Catalonia. They've been determined to try and stop this. And the policy that we've seen from Spain over the course of the preparations and the execution of this referendum was to try and delegitimize it by making it have low turnout. And they succeeded in that. They confiscated close to 2 million ballots in the lead up to the referendum. They were arresting the various agents of the Catalonian state who were engaged in trying to organize the election, saying they were using basically government dollars to, subvert the country. And then on election day itself, you saw these thousands of Spanish police deploy and use force, rubber bullets, batons, dragging people out of polling places, smashing ballot boxes. I mean, this was really a decision to use force, essentially use the national police to disrupt this vote. And so the Spanish king is going to address the country in about an hour and 5 minutes at 3 o'clock Eastern time. He is going to try and strike a conciliatory tone. But suffice it to say, the Catalonian side and the Spanish side have never been further apart. I think the fact that we saw almost 900 people in Catalonia injured by the Spanish police during what should have been a peaceful day of voting on Sunday, I think kind of drove home the alienation they feel from that government. So there are a lot of discontent in the traditional nation state this week. And in both cases, Iraq and Spain's case, most international bodies, the United Nations, the United States, are on the side of the central governments, not wanting these restive populations to seek independence. We'll see if that's a smart position to take in the long run, and particularly as it comes to Kurdistan. This is seeming like something the U.S. might come to regret, given how much the Kurds have done for us and the fact that we've repeatedly, in the war on terrorism over the last decade, made assurances to the Kurds that if you help us now, if you help us fight to get the Al-Qaeda out of the country, if you work against the Islamic State and Daesh, then we're going to help broker talks with Iraq. The U.S. has repeatedly failed to follow through on any of those promises. And now to sort of not be there at their moment of need, I think is a policy decision we'll have to deal with for a while.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got the Rohingya in Myanmar, in the former Burma. Now Aung San Suu Kyi is saying, come on back home. Do I get this right?
It's a very disingenuous, I think, promise. And I have been frustrated, to say the least, here at the United Nations this week, to, on one hand, every week hear messages from human rights officials saying the Myanmar government is carrying out ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, which you'd think would be the foremost thing a government could do to delegitimize itself. And then a sentence later say, we have UN officials on the ground working with the Myanmar government to bring these people back into the country. What is it? Can you protect people, or are you ethnic cleansing? I think the fact that the UN is purporting that the Myanmar authorities can do both is a little absurd.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like the kind of double-sided talk that we used to get out of Slobodan Milosevic.
Indeed.
Anyhow, Luke Vargas. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Tom. Bye-bye.
We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University, we're reading from what is apparently Donald Trump's second favorite book. His number one, according to his first wife, as I recall, was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which was on his bed next to his, or on his bedstand next to his bed for years. But when he was asked by reporters his favorite book, he said P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money. So I thought, hey, let's check this out. This is from the introduction. Those who really desire to attain an independence, but have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means, as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. But however easy it may be found to make money, I have no doubt many of my hearers will agree it is the most difficult thing in the world to keep it. The road to wealth is, as Dr. Ben Franklin truly says, as plain as the road to the mill. It consists simply in expending less than we earn. That seems to be a very simple problem. Mr. Micawber, one of those happy creations of the genial Dickens, puts the case in a strong light when he says that to have an income of £20 per annum and spend £20 and 6 pence is to be the most miserable of men, whereas to have an income of only £20 and spend but £19 and 6 pence is to be the happiest of mortals. Many of my readers may say, we understand this. This is economy, and we know economy is wealth. We know we can't eat our cake and keep it also. Yet I beg to say that perhaps more cases of failure arise from mistakes on this point than almost any other. The fact is, many people think they understand economy when they really do not. True economy is misapprehended, and people go through life without properly comprehending what that principle is. One person says, I have an income of so much, and here's my neighbor who has the same, yet every year he gets something ahead and I fall short. Why is it? I know all about economy. Well, he thinks he does, but he does not. There are many who think that economy consists in saving cheese parings and candle ends. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 1900s. In cutting off 2 pence from the laundress's bill and doing all sorts of little mean, dirty things. Economy is not meanness. The misfortune is also that this class of persons let their economy apply in only one direction. They fancy that they are so wonderfully economical in saving a half penny where they ought to spend 2 pence that they think they can afford to squander in other directions. A few years ago, before kerosene oil was discovered or thought of, one might stop overnight at almost any farmer's house in the agricultural districts to get a very good supper. But after supper, he might attempt to read in the sitting room and would find it impossible with insufficient light from just one candle. The hostess, seeing his dilemma, would say, it is rather difficult to read here in the evenings. The proverb said, you must have a ship at sea in order to be able to burn 2 candles at once. We never have an extra candle except on extra occasions. Those extra occasions occur perhaps twice a year. In this way, the good woman saves $5, $6, or $10 in that time, but the information which might be derived from having an extra candle would, of course, far outweigh a ton of candles. But the trouble does not end there. Feeling that she is so economical in tallow candles, she thinks she can afford to go frequently to the village and spend $20 or $30 for ribbons and furloughs, many of which are not necessary. This false economy may frequently be seen in men of business, and in those instances, it often runs to paper writing. You find good businessmen who save all the old envelopes and scraps and would not tear a new sheet of paper if they could avoid it for the world. This is all very well. They may in this way save $5 or $10 a year, but being so economical only in note paper, they think they can afford to waste time, to have expensive parties, and to drive their own carriages. This is an illustration of Dr. Franklin's, quote, saving at the spigot and wasting at the bunghole, or penny wise and pound foolish. Punch, and speaking of this one idea class of people, says they are like the man who bought a penny herring for his family's dinner and then hired a coach and 4 to take it home. I never knew a man who succeeded to succeed by practicing this kind of economy. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer if necessary. Dispense with the new pair of gloves. Mend the old dress. Live on plainer food if need be. So that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. Penny here, a dollar there, placed at interest, goes on accumulating, and in this way, the real desire is attained. It requires some training, perhaps, to accomplish this economy, but once used to it, you will find there is more satisfaction in rational saving than in irrational spending. Here's a recipe which I recommend. I have found it to work an excellent cure for extravagance and especially for mistaken economy. When you find that you have no surplus at the end of the year and yet have a good income, I advise you to take a few sheets of paper and form them into a book and mark down every item of expenditure. Posted every day or week in 2 columns, one headed necessities, the other comforts, and the other headed luxuries. And you will find that the latter column will be double, triple, and frequently 10 times greater than the former. The real comfort of life costs but a small portion of what most of us can earn. Dr. Franklin said, "It is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us. If all the world were blind except myself, I should not care for fine clothes and furniture." It is the fear of what Mrs. Grundy may say that keeps the noses of most worthy families to the grindstone. In America, many persons like to repeat, "We are all free and equal." But it is a great mistake in more senses than one. That we are born free and equal is a glorious truth in one sense, yet we are not all born equally rich, and we never shall be. So anyhow, the book is The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money by P.T. Barnum. It's actually a pretty good book. We'll be
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us, former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, two-time presidential candidate. Kucinich.com is the website. You can tweet him at Dennis_Kucinich. And Congressman, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked.
Tom, it has been, and I have to tell you, I'm always grateful to be on with you. I appreciate the contributions that you have made, intellectually, to a body of knowledge that helps shape our politics, our environment, and I'm telling you how pleased I am to be with you.
Well, thank you. Back at you. I've been a big fan for years and years. So you are speaking out now about nuclear weapons. Tell us about this.
Well, I had the privilege of addressing the United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting a week ago in New York on nuclear abolition, nuclear disarmament, and nuclear abolition. And, we are at a crisis moment in human history where rhetoric is precipitating saber-rattling with nuclear weapons, which could cause us to stumble into a nuclear catastrophe. So I joined representatives, one other person, a young woman from Kazakhstan, with representatives of over 40 nations who a week ago talked about the urgency of nuclear disarmament and abolishing all nuclear weapons. And, with the events in North Korea and the escalating rhetoric, we really need to face this matter squarely and understand the implications if we journey into the dark night of nuclear of the implementation of nuclear weapon use.
It has seemed to me over the years that the last time we had a high-profile Republican who was in favor of nuclear disarmament, it was Ronald Reagan, and some of that might have come out of good intentions, some of it just out of his kind of fantasy land of the last few years of his presidency, as he was slipping, shall we say. But is this a partisan issue? And if so, what do we do about that? And if not, what do we do about that?
Well, it's not a partisan issue at all. As a matter of fact, it's not an issue at all, which is part of the problem. I mean, President Obama okayed $1 trillion refurbishment of the nuclear weapon infrastructure. This is a problem that we have in our culture. The reliance on nuclear weapons. What President Reagan tried to do is to suggest that we could come up with a defensive device that would shield the country from nuclear weapons. That proved to be a fantasy. This idea of so-called brilliant pebbles, the Strategic Defense Initiative, never worked to begin with. If you get into a conflict with a country that has many weapons, it's fallacious to think that one won't get through. The idea that a nuclear war is winnable has been the lie was put to that years ago by, I think it was Orville Shaw, who wrote a book about that. The Fate of the Earth was another book. We really need to come to our senses about the cataclysmic potential of a nuclear weapon. All we do is have to look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the weapons today are many times that. And the fact that human beings are fallible, we have a president who rattles a nuclear saber. At the UN, he talked about destroying North Korea. That kind of rhetoric is precipitous. It escalates. We need to take a different approach in our diplomacy that can't be weapon-based. We need to perfect the science of human relationship, not perfect the science of nuclear weapons in order to resolve the difficulties that nations have between each other.
I absolutely get it that tweaking the nose of a thin-skinned tin pot dictator, wannabe king of the world who has nuclear weapons is a stupid idea. But Kim Jong-un keeps doing that. He keeps tweaking Donald Trump's nose. Is there any...
I got that. But let's look at some underlying reality which the American people are generally unaware of. And that is that the United States, together with South Korea, has been conducting war games on the border, on the edge of the DMZ zone, with live fire from rockets and tanks and 78,000 troops on the border, as if we're going to invade the North. And the North's missile testing has to be, which can't be justified, but it must be seen in the context of an invasion that is being feigned or practiced by the United States and South Korea. We have to, if you don't do that, if you don't want to stumble into and precipitate a wider war. And that's why, I think that the U.S. needs to get out of South Korea. We need to stop pretending that North Korea is a bargaining chip in our relationship with China, because this is really about China and Russia, even more than it's about North Korea. If we have these pretensions that somehow we are going to dominate that region, that level of megalomania needs some serious mental health counseling. Yeah. And so we need, this is a time for diplomacy. This is a time for us to engage Russia and China and North Korea in an agreement that we stop the rhetoric, stop pretending we're going to invade, stop pretending that we can have a sphere of influence in somebody's backyard or their front yard. Look at a map. I would ask anybody listening to this program, look at a map where North Korea is. Look to the north and the west. There is China. Look to the north and the east. There is Russia. What are we doing?
Right. Yeah, absolutely agree. So is there, we're talking with Dennis Kucinich, former Congressman Dennis Kucinich. Kucinich.com is his website. You can tweet him at Dennis_Kucinich.
Congressman, what is there an agency, a website, a group, an advocacy group? Is there, for somebody who's listening to this conversation and saying, I'd like to do something, whether it's showing up for a meeting or sending $25 or just spreading the good word, where would you point people?
Well, there's a number of advocacy groups who are trying to get rid of nuclear weapons. I spoke at the UN on behalf of a broad coalition of international groups who rally under the name of the BASEL, B-A-S-E-L, peace group. But you have Abolition 2000. There are the parliamentarians for nuclear disarmament. There's a number of groups. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, they can go to Kucinich.com and send me a message, and I'll put them in touch with the leaders of various organizations. But more than anything, Tom, we need to demand that our leaders in Congress take down this nuclear weapons infrastructure. This does not provide deterrence. It invites the use of nuclear weapons. And we only have to look to Hiroshima and Nagasaki to know the effect. I'll tell you, I was very moved when I heard that a leading Japanese official speak to the United Nations. Japan knows the price of the misuse of nuclear weapons, and we need to take a lesson from that and stop dancing in the graveyard of history here, pretending that just because we have nuclear weapons that we're going to be safe. The only way we'll ever be safe is to lead the effort in getting rid of all nuclear weapons.
Brilliantly said.
My speech, by the way, Tom, on the United Nations, it can be people can get it on the UN website, and they can also go to the web. I think it's been reprinted in a couple different places.
Yeah. Okay. Congressman Kucinich, thank you so much for being with us today.
Tom, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thank you, Congressman Dennis Kucinich. It's always great having you with us. You can tweet him, Dennis_Kucinich, and Kucinich.com. We'll be back. And welcome back, Glenn in Olivet, Michigan. Hey, Glenn, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom. Hey, I'd kind of like to redirect this whole thing with Vegas to back something up. Heard you talk about forever.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than gun control, I think there's a mental issue here. And you've talked about in the past, big pharma and all the side effects of all these drugs. And personally, whether you have a weapon of mass destruction, whether you have a pickup truck or whatever, I don't think it's the vehicle that causes the destruction. I think it's more the mental issue. And I'd like to see, we see on the news, so-and-so was killed by a drunk driver, but we never see on the news what kind of drugs these people are on that causes all these issues. And
that's because of the medical privacy laws.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the thing of it, and I also wonder if mainstream media doesn't protect big pharma because
they advertise hugely. Yeah, of course they do. Of course they do.
And personally, I think that's the biggest issue. I think that's the root of the problem. It's not the vehicle. It's not the regulations on the arms. I don't think that regulations on the arms are going to fix the problem. I think we need to get to the root of the problem.
Yeah. I think that both are real. We know that people who take SSRI drugs and some other drugs, but particularly the SSRIs, are more likely to end up committing suicide and more likely to kill other people in the process of committing suicide. That's fairly well established to the point that the FDA has required the pharmaceutical companies to put a label on their products warning you that if you start thinking about suicide, stop taking this drug right away and contact your physician. There is that.
Contact your physician, exactly. And,
right.
And how many people are thinking suicide? Are going to contact your physician?
Well, there is something to be said for that kind of internal self-talk. Back in the day when I used to I used to know people who were using addictive drugs, and you know, you'd have a friend. I had a friend once going through with heroin withdrawal, which is nowhere near as bad as they show in the movies, but it's still, you know, 2 or 3 days of not sleeping well and not feeling well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kept saying to him was, you know, just another day, and this will be over. You know, can you make it just another day? Oh yeah, I can make it just another day. And after 3 days, he was no longer having trouble sleeping, and he was no longer, you know, feeling dysregulated and craving his heroin. And that was the end of that. Frankly, when I quit tobacco, I did essentially the same thing. It just took, you know, a couple of months instead of a couple of days.
Right. Right.
But if you've got that dialogue, you know, if you're starting to feel suicidal and you look on the bottle and it says, this may cause you to feel suicidal, then for many people, that'll cause them to say, maybe I'm not really suicidal. Maybe those thoughts are not really me. Maybe this is the drug speaking, and maybe I should either call my doctor or just quit taking this drug or both, and get some help. And so, you know, I think that publicizing the suicidal dimension of SSRI drugs is a good thing. And, you know, like I've said many times, I think they are overprescribed. I'm not saying they should be banned or anything like that. But you know, I think that they're overprescribed, and this is one of the results. Glad I got to run. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Rich in Sedro-Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I love reminding my friends about the Second Amendment. Doesn't say anything about the right to buy guns or the right to own guns. That's number one. Number two is the best argument for the banning the big clips is the Seattle Pacific University shooting, where the shooter had a pump shotgun with 3 shells in it. Sadly, he killed one girl at the university. He injured one young man. He missed on the 3rd shot, and then 2 good guys without guns took him out.
Right. So he was using a duck load. He had 3 shots.
Yeah, he had 3 shots, and he got taken out. As soon as he finished his 3 shots, he was trying to reload, and they took him out. But what I really called about was your plan to insure guns.
Mm-hmm.
I think promoting the free market solution is Republicans love a free market solution.
You would think, and the insurance company could say, okay, you've never had an accident with your gun. You've proven to us that you have a gun safe. You use gun trigger locks. Your insurance is going to be $35 a year. They'd look at another guy and say, oh, you've got 2 convictions on your record for domestic violence. You don't have a gun case for your car. You have a conviction for drunk driving and an arrest for assault. Your insurance is going to be $700 a year. You know, I mean, it's just that's how it would work, right?
Yeah, it's capitalism.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the Republicans love. That's the way to sell the idea.
Yeah.
And that's a good way for them to make money once we go to single payer.
Well, yeah, I mean, the NRA could sell the insurance. They could then,
Absolutely.
give up that money from the weapons manufacturers. Seems like a plan to me.
Bigger guns.
Yeah.
More money.
Yeah. Rich, I got to move along, but thank you. Excellent suggestion. Ira in Seminole, Florida. Hey, Ira, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
One of the ways I think we might be able to get some control on these assault weapons is that most of them are bought by the military with where they're automatics. And then they also make a version for the, quote, home use.
Yeah, civilian market, yeah.
Why not get the generals to write into the specs that they can't sell those guns, period?
Why not just pass a law saying that, there's, if it's so important that a person be able to have the experience of firing an automatic weapon, then license them to these gun ranges and let them be the only place you can go to do that. I did that when we lived in Georgia. In fact, I took two of my kids. And, we shot the Uzis and Brownings and Remingtons, and we shot all kinds of fully automatic weaponry, just for the hell of it.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, but that's a whole different thing than selling it to the public. I mean, that's just a whole different thing.
But get the generals to get that written into the Army specs where if they sell to the individuals, to the private sector,
yeah, then
they're not allowed to sell to the military.
Yeah. But see, I don't think it should be in the specs. I think it should be in our law. I mean, our law should say, here we should clearly identify sports weapons and self-defense weapons and weapons of war. And weapons that can be used for sporting and weapons that can be used for self-defense fall into a different category than weapons of war. And it's already, by the way, these categories have already been established. It's just that we have arbitrarily moved the, high-performance guns out of the weapons of war category and into the sporting category. And the weapons manufacturers and the NRA did that, not us, not we the people. And I think if most people were asked, they would say, an AR-15 is not a sporting weapon. It's a weapon of war, for example. And many of these things that are sold, they are weapons of war. They should not be for sale on American streets. Ira, I've got to move along here.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot for the call. Kurt in Loves Park, Illinois. Just a minute to the break, Kurt. Quick one?
Yeah, I can make it quick. Thanks for taking my call. Something that kind of baffles me is we have public service announcements for just about everything. Seat belts, child seats, condoms, everything else. And I'm thinking that the reason we've never seen one for gun safety is the NRA. And I've often thought that I just imagine if Walmart came out and did a public service announcement and said with every firearm you buy, we'll give you a free trigger lock. Or something to get the conversation on a wide basis or format to get people thinking about gun safety in general. That won't address, obviously, what just happened, but it would be so easy. I mean, I'm thinking the NRA would try to do a nationwide boycott of Walmart.
Well, the first step is to get the weapons off our streets like the Australians did back in 1998, I think it was, to get the weapons of war off our streets. And that was a massive buyback, weapon buyback program. It was very successful in Australia. We could be doing the same thing here. Kurt, thank you for the call. Yeah, I'm with you. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of your calls after this. Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Robert Draper's book, When the Tea Party Came to Town. And it was actually the original title of this book when it first came out was called Do Not Ask What Good We Do. And this is the only book that tells the story of how the Republicans got together the night that Barack Obama was being inaugurated and decided that for the next 4 or 8 years, they were going to do everything they could to destroy our first black president's presidency.
And so I'm reading from the prologue, and he's talking about how Frank Luntz had organized that dinner that I was just mentioning. He was very happy about that. The dinner tables were set in a square. This was at the Caucus Room restaurant in a private dining room. It was a little restaurant down at the corner of 9th and D Street. The dinner tables were set in a square at Luntz's request so that everyone could see each other and talk freely. He asked that Gingrich speak first. Gingrich was happy to oblige. And, it goes on through this. Pete Huckster said, so we're in the depths. And then we get right into it. They would take back that this was their plan. What their party had done from 94 to 2000, what the Democrats had done from 2006 and 2008, the Republicans would once do again. They would take back the House in November 2010, then they would use the House as the Republicans' spear point to mortally wound President Obama in 2011. They would do this and retake the House and the Senate in 2012. They would do all this, but only if the American voter blessed them to do so. It made no sense they all agreed to attack Obama personally. He was too popular. It's got to be about ideas, said Eric Cantor. Democrats now controlled everything and were already with a monstrously priced economic stimulus package showing their true colors. Given time, they'd screw things up, as the GOP had. But, said Paul Ryan, everyone's got to stick together. Ryan, a 38-year-old Wisconsin congressman and numbers fetishist, whose shiny earnestness recalled an Ozzie and Harriet America. Ryan hated squabbling among conservatives, the paleos versus the neos, the socials against the moderates, and on for as long as he'd been on the Hill, which was most all of his adult life. Ryan had long sought to be the Republican Party's glue, pleading for adherence to principles and data. At times, he looked like the underfed, hollow-eyed child of alcoholic parents. The only way we'll succeed is if we're united, Ryan told the others. If we tear ourselves apart, we're finished. But, he added, he liked what he was hearing now. Everyone at the table sounded like a genuine conservative. It was a place to start. If you act like you're the minority, you're going to stay in the minority, said Kevin McCarthy. We got to challenge them on every single bill and challenge them on every single campaign. That's Kevin McCarthy. Luntz viewed McCarthy as one of the Republican Party's emerging stars, an easygoing, unthreatening guy who understood that language and appearance mattered as much as substance. Nonetheless, the poller and media guru interjected a cautionary note. One of the worst political performances I've ever seen, he said, was when the Democrats took over the House in 2007 and Nancy Pelosi shut out the Republicans and everyone whined about it. If any of you behave that way, I'll go on TV and hold you accountable. Luntz tended to get carried away, but everyone knew he had a point. Senator John Kyle began to focus on immediate tactics. He pointed out that Tim Geithner, Obama's nominee to be Secretary of the Treasury, had failed to pay his Social Security and Medicare taxes during his 3-year employment at the International Monetary Fund. Kyle sat on the Senate Finance Committee, which would be conducting Geithner's confirmation hearings the next morning. The Arizona senator intended to go after the nominee. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the approach I should take, he said to the others. There was a pattern here, Gingrich pointed out. Charlie Rangel, the new House and Ways and Means Committee chairman, hadn't paid taxes on his rental property income in more than 2 decades. Randall and Geithner would be wielding more power over how taxpayer dollars would be spent than anyone else in America. And then there's the web, chimed in McCarthy. There are freshmen who accept campaign money from Rangel. They're caught in the web. McCarthy suggested that they waste no time smacking down the New Democrats for the tax ads. The dinner lasted nearly 4 hours. They parted company almost giddily. The Republicans had finally agreed on a way forward. Go after Geithner, and indeed Kyle did the next day. Would you answer my question rather than dancing around it, please? Show united and unyielding opposition to the president's policies. 8 days later, Minority Whip Cantor would hold the House Republicans to a unanimous no against Obama's economic stimulus plan. Begin attacking vulnerable Democrats on the airwaves. The first Democratic National Republican Congressional Committee attacks would run in fewer than 2 months. Win the spear point of the House in 2010. Jab Obama relentlessly in 2011. Win the White House and the Senate in 2012. You will remember this day, Newt Gingrich proclaimed to the others as they said goodbye. You'll remember this as the day the seeds of 2012 were sown. Well, not so much, but I'd say that this is when the seeds of 2016 were sown. Forgotten, or at least not discussed that night in the caucus room, was what had been sown in America by January 20th, 2009. That was the day the meeting happened, the day that President Obama was sworn into office. On that evening, while the ruling party celebrated in tuxedos and the minority party retrenched over steaks and red wine, U.S. unemployment rate had climbed to 7.6%, the highest such indicator of national misery in 18 years. Things could get much worse. Joblessness in America would exceed 8% the following month. By May 2009, the number would climb to 9.4%, and by October to 10.2%. And it goes on. It's a great book. Robert Draper, When the Tea Party Came to Town. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Abraham in Escondido, California. Hey, Abraham, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I had an interesting thought. So I was listening to Untold History of the United States, and in it they mentioned that while regular nuclear bombs, I mean, they make a big explosion, obviously it kills a lot of people, the hydrogen bombs are a significant step up. More to the point, in an exchange of 100, 200 hydrogen bombs, you have a reasonable chance of causing a nuclear winter and wiping out all life on the planet.
Right.
So my question is, who sits between Trump saying, let's just drop everything we got, and the actual bombs themselves, and takes things like that into consideration, things more than just the immediate military conflict?
I'm not sure I exactly understand your question.
Well, if you drop some bombs on the enemy and they surrender, great. If you drop some bombs on the enemy and they surrender and then there's a nuclear winter and you kill everyone on the planet, you haven't really accomplished a whole lot.
Right.
So is there, what's the mechanism? What sits between...
Well, that's the problem, is there is no mechanism. And in fact, there are some Democrats who, and even some Republicans who seem inclined to go along with proposing legislation that would take away from the president the sole authority to order a nuclear strike, or at least put some very severe constraints on it. That it has to be a defensive strike. It cannot be a quote preventative strike. That the Cheney doctrine, that if a country has an even 1% chance of attacking the United States, we should attack them first. That's explicitly outlawed when it comes to nuclear weapons. Things like that. But right now there is no clear protection like that. And let's keep in mind, it's not just the United States and North Korea. There's a huge problem right now with Pakistan and India. Both of them building nuclear weapons like there's no tomorrow, and both of them, in a state of perpetual conflict. You've got, China is building nuclear weapons like there's no tomorrow. We have no idea how extensive that program is. It might be even bigger than Russia's. It might be, much smaller. Who knows? But we know that they're doing it. And, they're building aircraft carriers and submarines and things like that. There are a variety of nuclear threats, as well as, there's also chemical and biological threats that we're not taking seriously. And then, of course, there's the global warming threat that we don't seem to be taking seriously. I mean, the Pentagon is doing, threat analysis on all these things, but we're not having these conversations in the public sphere. And I think there should be. And I think your point, Abraham, between that there needs to be an intervening point between the president of the United States, or any other country for that matter, saying, okay, go ahead and nuke them, and somebody actually, pushing the button or turning the key, that there needs to be something there. And I don't know exactly what that is, but I think that we need to have a serious discussion about it in Congress. Abraham, I'm with you. I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Kitty in Boca Raton, Florida. Hey, Kitty, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a firearms owner, always have been. And I see what the problem is with the debate, and I see some solutions. And I honestly think what the problem is that you don't have enough moderates that actually understand firearms in the debate. You have people on the far left, and you have people on the far right. And that's why it doesn't go anywhere, because you have people on the far right that say it's a slippery slope, they don't want anything done. And then you have people on the far left who don't even know guns, and they're throwing their 2 cents in, which makes the people on the right push back even harder. Yeah. And I'll give you an example. Assault weapons. What makes an assault weapon really is cosmetic. So when everybody starts calling for these bans, and I'm just being honest, like, here's an example with the Mini 14. You can have a Mini 14 be an assault weapon, or you could have it be a ranch rifle. The only difference is the stock. The stock collapses, it's an assault rifle. The stock doesn't collapse, it's a ranch rifle. So
under current definitions. I'm suggesting under current definitions. I'm suggesting that the definitions, it probably shouldn't have to do with what kind of stock it has, but rather should have to do with the ammunition capacity.
Well, of course, but see, this is the thing. That's not how it is now. So in the past, when I hear these debates and people go, let's get rid of assault weapons, I'm like, okay, go ahead, get rid of the assault weapons. You could just go ahead and use the ranch rifle that shoots a .223 as well.
Right.
The assault one shoots a .223, collapsible stock, ban it. But then you have the other one that's a ranch rifle, and it's not banned. And so when people on the right start saying it's not going to do anything, they're right, because ban them, and the same weapon exists with the same.
Well, that's my point. That we need to redefine. There used to be a fairly clear. It used to be relatively unambiguous up until at least the 80s or 90s that assault weapons were high capacity weapons. They were weapons of war. They were designed not for sport but for killing human beings. And I'm sorry. And I get it, Kitty, that there are weapons that can be used for both. But
see, here's the thing: you have no idea, and I really want people to listen to me who are Democrats who throw their hat in this ring. You have to understand firearms before you start throwing these things out, because then the people on the right who do know firearms start going, you're not making any sense. It's not going to work. And it just becomes this deadlock thing. And like I'm watching the news. I'm hearing people say clips. They're not clips. They're magazines. They don't even know the right terms for things. And there is a difference.
Yeah.
So you have people who don't get and know firearms. And I mean, I can listen to it all day long and go, yeah, that's great. I know you have great intentions, but it's not going to do anything, and this is the reason why. And that's why I think that you need moderate Democrats that know firearms to be able to throw out some solutions. When you have people on the far left who are going, let's ban full auto. Well, let me just tell you something about full auto. To be able to have a machine gun, do you even know what kind of hoops you have to jump through? And the fact that you have that license gives the government the right to come into your house at any moment. It's not easy. And so when they start saying all their solutions, you're just like, it doesn't make sense. Just be quiet. You're making the people on the left dig their heels in even more. So, and then you'll have some sensible solutions, but then when you throw these ridiculous, things out there, that's what makes nothing happen. So let me tell you two things that I think that is sensible and easy, and I can't see how people even on the far right would have an issue with this. And you did touch on it a little bit. One is to make sure that if you're going to own a firearm, you know how to use it. Take a class. Make it mandatory that you take a class, even one freaking class. I go to ranges and I look at the people shooting next to me, and if I see somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and I see that all the time, I leave because it's not safe for me to be there. Yep. People shouldn't be able to own a gun, something that can kill, if they don't know how to use it. I see it all the time. I see people aiming the gun in all different directions. Yep. They don't know how to handle it when it's jammed. And so that one thing right there, it might not stop this mass shooting, but it will save lives. So if you're going to have a gun, know how to use it and make that mandatory. That's not a big deal. The other thing is, if you're going to have a gun, make sure that you have a locker for it or a safe. That right there will save kids.
Or a trigger guard.
Yeah, or a trigger guard, something to keep it protected and safe away from those two things. But the problem is, here's two really easy, sensible solutions, but what somebody on the far left is going to do is they're going to say, let's have classes, let's have kids' lockers, let's ban clips, let's ban full auto, let's do this, and they don't know what they're talking about. And I really think that you got to start somewhere, and you got to start easy so that something happens once and for all.
Kitty, I don't disagree. I agree with everything that you've said, and the Republicans who are taking money from the NRA are not interested in starting anywhere. They're not interested in even having this conversation.
I agree. And I am not a supporter of the NRA, and I have a nice collection of firearms, and I'm into the sport of hunting and trap and ski and all that stuff. But you know what? I'm just saying that the moderates are the ones that need to have this conversation.
Yeah.
The people on the far left, and God bless them, I love them. You know, I'm an environmentalist. I think you would be a great president. But when they start talking about things they don't know, all they're doing is making the people on the right go, no, absolutely not. It makes no sense. It's not going to do anything. You know what I mean? So
I do.
I see that
I do, and we're getting, Kitty, we're getting redundant here. I need to move along, but thank you for your call. Solid stuff. Jordan in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Jordan, what's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. I just wanted to bring up the irony of just our societal values that somebody like a terrorist organization, let's just say ISIS, was willing to say that what they saw yesterday, they identified as being a terrorist act. It inflicted fear in our community, made others feel unsafe in their own natural freedoms. But for some reason, the media refuses to refer to it as a terrorist attack, or we don't talk about these things as terrorist attacks. But outside of the world, they recognize that was a terrorist attack. It had all the calling marks of it, and it did the exact same damage that a terrorist attack is designed to do, make you feel unsafe in your own freedoms.
Yeah, except that generally a terrorist, in order to call what they're doing terrorism, there's a therefore to it. You know, I am doing this because I want this outcome. And as far as, and that may still come out. We may find out that this guy had some sort of a political agenda. But it's increasingly looking like he just wanted to commit suicide and go out in a blaze of glory, which, by the way, has been the case with a number of these mass shootings. In fact, it's the norm for mass shootings rather than the exception. And it may even be the norm for the so-called terrorist suicide bombers, that they really just wanted to commit suicide and taking a bunch of people with them is like a bonus. And, this is so I don't think that you're going to find A, terrorists feeling more responsible for what they're doing, or B, that you could use anti-terrorism logic with people who are simply suicidal and have access to high-capacity magazines and very, very, very powerful weaponry. So it's a tough one. Jordan, thank you for the call. Thanks for listening to KABQ. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Charlotte watching Free Speech TV in Ramona, California. Hey, Charlotte, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to make a suggestion for the Republicans. If they feel that they don't want to address anything to do with gun control, then perhaps they should offer up that they'll give universal health care so that the 500 and some people that have been shot and injured in Las Vegas and all the other people out there that get injured and are going to have probably a good portion of their lives ruined, at least don't have to go into bankruptcy to have their family or themselves taken care of.
Yeah.
I don't think they would do that, but I think it would also point out a little bit of their hypocrisy.
Well, it would require the Republicans to actually feel/take responsibility for anything, which is something that I've not seen in my lifetime very much of, shall we say. Yeah, but
and it seems more and more that they're taking less and less responsibility for absolutely it.
I mean, they're doubling down on this. Healthcare is not a right, but guns are.
Yeah.
How twisted is that, right? You have an absolute right to a gun, and we will fight to the death to preserve that. But you don't have a right to have healthcare. And tough luck if you think you should. I mean, really? This is their position.
And I don't think they would ever go for the idea of the gun owners having to have insurance, because in their minds, that would be the same as a poll tax. That would cost people that want to have guns extra expense. So there's no way they're going to go for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with you. I'm sure they'll oppose it, but it's just so absurd what's going on. Yeah, it's just so absurd. Charlotte, thank you for the call. Bob in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Tom.
Besides industrial hemp.
Huh?
I said, what's up besides industrial hemp?
Oh, and besides, well, yeah, I could tie that into a lot of things with the economy or the environment, but I would just say I appreciate the conversation that you're having. A sad day yesterday. I spent a good day of the day. Really sad. But anyway, it's good to visit, and I appreciate it. And I want to say something. I was going to say something about the NRA, which there's so much to be said, but it's already been said pretty much. I wanted to say something about the nuclear industry and how that's sort of undermining all nations around the world to have peace and live in peace and find the sustainable track, which I won't mention industrial hemp other than, that's part of the sustainable track. And I don't understand why we're not getting to the bottom of, the money. We all know how corrupted the situation is with money, from the media to energy to, the energy department's making bombs. Now what, okay. So we got Puerto Rico going on down here. It could be a new model for the whole world. Even Texas, southern Texas could be a model for the whole world. It could look good for Mexico. Mexico could do there could be a lot of good going on. Perhaps the wall could be a giant, really hard golf course, or something. Could it be a green zone?
Lots of possibilities. Bob, I got to wrap it up, but thanks for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. We'll be back. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and John in Muskegon, Michigan. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. The gun advocates like to talk a lot about fully automatic weapons versus semi-automatic weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And what they fail to mention a lot of times, it's very easy to convert a fully automatic weapon, or a semi-automatic weapon, to a fully automatic weapon. There's videos on YouTube that show you how to do it.
Yep.
And
plus, there is a legal device that is sold in Nevada, which it takes the recoil from the shot and transmits that back to a little hook on the trigger and repulls the trigger. So once you fire the first shot from a semi-automatic weapon, it will empty the magazine as a fully automatic weapon. And that's apparently what this shooter was using. And they're called bump stocks.
Yeah, and for that reason, I think all the law-abiding citizens in this country should be able to have all the revolvers, shotguns, and hunting rifles they want, but all the automatic weapons, they need to be out of the hands of civilians.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as I keep saying, we need to redefine what an assault weapon is and what a sporting weapon is, and
absolutely,
and then in a rational fashion. And I think the principal part of that definition should be the ammunition capacity. Keep in mind, Gabby Giffords, when the guy was shot Gabby Giffords, and I believe he killed 9 people, as I recall, or at least shot 9 people. The reason that he was stopped was because he had to reload. And while he was trying to reload, he had a magazine that jammed, and he got taken down. That's a good story, right? And those were relatively high capacity magazines, as I recall. Those were 14 clip magazines. So, or 14 shot magazines. So anyway, John, thank you for the call. Fred in Los Angeles. Hey, Fred, what's up?
I'm not sure what else there is to say. Everybody else has touched on what I've been saying.
Okay.
Regarding single payer, and if we had single payer, one wonders how much longer we would put up with this, because the people would have to be paying.
Yeah.
For all this carnage.
Well, we're going to have to pay anyway. I mean, we're paying the lost cost of productivity. We're paying for those people who are uninsured. We're paying for a lot of this already, Fred. But yeah, I'm with you. And frankly, if we had universal health care, then we might be talking about guns as a public health issue as well, because frankly, I think they are. Fred, excellent point. Thank you for the call. Sheila in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Sheila, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I remember you had a list of the names of members of Congress and the dollar amounts, how much money they took from the NRA. And I thought, well, it's too late today, but tomorrow might be a good day to refresh our memories of the names of the members of Congress and how much money they each took. Example, Cory Gardner, $3.8 million.
Cory Gardner took over $3 million from the NRA?
Yes, Republican of Colorado.
Yeah, I know who he is. That's a hell of a lot of money.
You're the one. You had that list. It was like some months ago.
Yeah, we did a daily take on that a while ago. If you go to what is it's public Open Secrets, opensecrets.org. Yeah, if you go to opensecrets.org, you should be able to easily get that information, Sheila. And I'll poke around when I get off the air today and see what I can find. So
thank you.
Thank you very much. Great to hear from you. Tripper in Decatur, Georgia. Hey, Tripper, what's up?
Hey, how you doing? So just like two things. Like one, I had this conversation yesterday about the, someone was telling me, oh, you can take in a semi-automatic weapon and turn it automatic really easily. And my response to that was, well, then anything that can be converted easily should also be part of any kind of assault weapon ban. And the bump stocks you were just talking about, that should be illegal too. You should be able to even get them.
Agreed.
There should be high penalties for anyone who tries to, great. There's YouTube videos on how to do it, but if you do it, there should be, penalties for doing it.
Yep.
And the other thing is that I don't know if anyone made this point, but if gun owners were required to have liability insurance, it would actually be the insurance companies who would be writing the gun control laws, because all of a sudden they'd be the ones like, hey, we got to put the bill for negligence. We're going to lobby and make sure that, people can't own certain things because we don't want to pay for it.
That's right. That's my point. And they will also do what actuaries do. They're going to look at people based on their risk. Okay, here's a guy, who's got 2 convictions for domestic violence and 1 for drunk driving, and he owns 35 weapons. And here's another guy who's never been convicted of anything, never even had a parking ticket. And he wants a concealed carry permit, or he wants whatever. He wants a deer hunting rifle. Okay, person A, we're going to charge you $1,000 a month for your insurance. Person B, we're going to charge you $10 a month for your insurance. I mean, this isn't.
It seems like there's 2 great avenues here. Either you go the avenue where it's the insurance avenue and where thereby the insurance companies write the rules,
right?
Or the single payer avenue where where it's the medical industry saying, hey, you know what, you got these lack of gun control laws is costing this industry a ton of money because the government has to now put the bill for people who get shot.
Yeah.
And then the government might get involved and say, hey, you know what, we don't want to pay for this either. You know what I mean? But as long as the the cost of it is on the people themselves who get shot, no one gives a crap.
And you wonder to what extent, it would be interesting to go back and see to what extent the auto insurance industry was involved in the 1970s in the campaign to get every car to have seat belts and collapsible steering wheels. I realize Ralph Nader started that campaign, but I would guess that the auto insurance industry would have been gung-ho for it because so many people were severely injured before we got seatbelts, and our cars have been made so much safer. And of course, guns could be made so much safer. It's possible to easily make guns right now that recognize their owners and can only be fired by one person. So anyway, Tripper, thank you for the call. And to everybody else, I'm sorry we haven't gotten to you today. There's still the rest of the week. So thank you for being with us today throughout our show. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us on board. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.